Chapter 97. Wu Bo's chest was pierced and his heart was crushed. He turned his head with difficulty and looked at Senior Brother Qin. He hissed, "You?" Behind him, Senior Brother Qin grinned and said with a smile, "You even have an earth-rank Fulu. As expected of a core disciple, the eldest son of an elder, your wealth is really rich. It really makes people envious." The sudden change not only made Wu Bo feel disbelief, but Li Mu's face also showed shock. Just now, he saw a scene that he never expected. Senior Brother Qin, who was also a disciple of the Fulu school, took advantage of Wu Bo's earth-rank Fulu to sneak attack from behind. His hand went through Wu Bo's chest and crushed his heart. Li Mu's first thought was that Senior Brother Qin and Wu Bo had a grudge against each other. But before this, they didn't show it at all. Li Qing instinctively took a step forward and stood in front of Li Mu, shielding him behind her. After the little monk Huiyuan came back to his senses, he looked at Senior Brother Qin with a solemn expression and murmured, "I didn't expect that Benefactor Qin had already fallen into the devil's path." Senior Brother Qin pulled his hand out of Wu Bo's chest. When he wiped the blood on his arm, he still had a faint smile on his face. He shook his head and said, "You core disciples, the eldest son of an elder, the sect provides you with courage for refining your soul. The sect provides you with soul power for condensing your soul, and the elders also give you precious Fulu." He looked at his blood-stained palm and said, "For ordinary disciples like us, no matter how hard we work, no matter how hard we cultivate, what's the use? We will still be easily overtaken by you. If we want to stand out, we can only rely on our own hands." Wu Bo's heart was crushed. His face was extremely pale, but his body did not collapse. He gritted his teeth and said, "You deliberately led us here." Senior Brother Qin, who had always been kind, finally showed a sinister smile on his face. He said, "You deliberately framed your companion. Just like me, you're not a good person. It's not a pity that you're dead. You might as well help me." When he said these words, the Zombie King only looked at him indifferently. The surrounding jumping zombies did not attack. Senior Brother Qin bowed towards the Zombie King from afar and said loudly, "Your Excellency Zombie King, according to our agreement, this person's soul essence belongs to you, and his primordial spirit belongs to me." The Zombie King rolled his eyes, looked at Wu Bo's body, and suddenly took a deep breath. Li Mu felt that the soul in his body was unstable and almost left his body. He immediately focused his mind and firmly controlled the soul in his body. To be able to absorb a person's blood essence and soul from a distance, this Zombie King was only a step away from being a flying stiff. Although it was not a flying stiff, it already had a portion of the flying stiff's abilities. Li Mu was affected, but Wu Bo's primordial spirit was still firmly in his body. The wound on his chest was also emitting a faint white light, and was rapidly healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not only that, a new heart had appeared in his originally empty chest, and it was beating vigorously. Impossible! Senior Brother Qin's expression changed greatly. Then, he realized something and said in shock, "You actually have a heaven-stage Fulu!" In the blink of an eye, the wound on Wu Bo's chest had completely healed, and the Fulu in his hand had exhausted its spirit energy and turned into ashes. His expression was exceedingly gloomy. This heaven-rank talisman was capable of allowing severed limbs to regrow, and it was almost equivalent to possessing 2 lives. It was the only heaven-rank talisman he possessed, and it was extraordinarily precious. He'd utterly never imagined that he would have to use it at a time like this. He threw the Earth-stage Fulu in his hand into the air. After the Fulu stopped in the air, it released a white light, completely illuminating the cave. "You deserve to die." Wu Bo stared at Senior Brother Qin, the hatred in his eyes overflowing. The Fulu turned into a white light and finally condensed into a sword shadow. It floated in the air and emitted a terrifying aura. Wu Bo pointed at Senior Brother Qin and said resentfully, "Go to hell!" The sword shadow turned into a stream of light and went straight for Senior Brother Qin. Even the weakest Earth-stage Fulu was enough to kill a divine ability cultivator. Senior Brother Qin was locked onto by the sword light. His expression changed greatly as he shouted, "Your Excellency Corpse King, save me!" As soon as he finished speaking, a black shadow appeared in front of him out of thin air. Clang! The sword light struck the zombie king's body, causing sparks to fly in all directions. After one strike, the sword light disappeared. Even the zombie king's copper skin and iron bones had a deep wound on his back. His entire body was almost split in half. The boundless courage in his body circulated, and the wound on his back gradually wriggled and healed. Senior Brother Qin heaved a sigh of relief and immediately said, "Thank you, Your Excellency Corpse King." Ugh! Before he could finish his sentence, he stopped abruptly. The zombie king stretched out his hands, and his sharp nails pierced into his neck. The blood essence in Senior Brother Qin's body was sucked into the zombie king's body in an instant. His body withered, and his primordial spirit escaped in fear. He said in panic, "Your Excellency Corpse King, you..." Hiss! The zombie king sucked in a breath of air at his primordial spirit. Senior Brother Qin's primordial spirit directly collapsed, turning into specks of light that were sucked into the zombie king's body. Cultivators of the assembled god realm, who had just condensed their primordial spirit, could also use most divine abilities, and their strength would not be weakened by too much. However, this zombie king originally cultivated by sucking blood and souls, which just happened to restrain the soul and primordial spirit. As a cultivator of the assembled god realm, Senior Brother Qin still had a chance to escape if he fought with him head-on. However, he was suddenly attacked, and his body was destroyed, so his primordial spirit could not escape. After absorbing Senior Brother Qin's soul and primordial spirit, the wound on the zombie king's back had completely healed. The aura in his body also instantly soared, and his withered hair gradually turned black and lustrous. His shriveled skin, at a speed visible to the naked eye, became plump and rosy, and the corpse aura on his body disappeared without a trace. In the blink of an eye, the corpse's appearance became no different from a normal person. He took off Senior Brother Qin's clothes and put them on himself, turning into the appearance of a middle-aged man. He looked at Wu Bo with his gray eyes and greedily licked the corner of his mouth. Flying stiff. Li Qing held the cyan rainbow sword tightly and said in a low voice, "Be careful. It has already evolved into a flying stiff." A zombie that had just evolved into a flying stiff had the strength of a fourth realm cultivator. After Wu Bo's body regained its vitality, his aura was much more sluggish than before. He instantly moved to the side of Li Qing and the others and said loudly, "It has already evolved into a flying stiff. It's not easy to deal with. Everyone attack together." The sword light in Li Qing's hand shone even brighter, and Huiyuan also raised the alms bowl again. In front of a great enemy, it was not the time to be calculative about the grudges from before. Wu Bo flashed behind the two, but suddenly took out a Fulu with spirit energy circulating on its surface and stuck it on his forehead. The surface of the Fulu flashed with spirit energy, and his body directly burrowed into the ground, disappearing from the cave. Huiyuan looked back and found that Wu Bo had already disappeared, and said angrily, "It's the Earth Escape technique." Constable Wu ran away by himself. The 5 elements escape technique was a technique that could only be cultivated by those who had reached the transcendent realm. Wu Bo was indeed a core disciple of the Fulu school. He had an endless supply of Fulu. After he ran away, Li Mu and the others had to face this zombie king that had just evolved into a flying stiff. Li Mu cursed in his heart, and used all his strength to activate the Buddha's light in his body. Li Qing's hands formed a seal, and the spirit energy in the cave surged. The zombie king seemed to have sensed danger, and instinctively took a step back. Its ash-white eyes kept moving, as if it was thinking. In the next moment, it abandoned Li Mu and the others, and flew into a tunnel. In front of that tunnel, there was an aura that was quickly escaping. Wu Bo used the Earth Escape technique to leave the ground. When he saw the sunlight, he let out a long sigh of relief. Never had he imagined that his trip underground this time would actually be so dangerous. Not only had he encountered a zombie king that had evolved into a flying zombie, he'd even encountered a traitor from the Talisman sect, and it almost caused him to lose his life here. If it weren't for the few life-saving Fulu that his grandfather had given him, he would probably have died down there. After this battle, although he had saved his life, the Fulu on him had been used up. He didn't want to take the risk of fighting the flying stiff, so he abandoned his colleagues and used the Earth Escape Talisman to escape. After doing such a thing, he couldn't stay in Zhou County and Yangqiu County anymore. He could only return to the ancestral court and ask for his grandfather's protection. His mind raced, and just as he was about to escape, a black shadow suddenly descended from the sky. Chapter 98. Without the zombie king in the underground cave, the pressure on Li Mu and the other two was greatly reduced. Li Qing and Huiyuan dealt with the remaining few jumping zombies with all their strength, while Li Mu used the Buddha's light to protect his body while cleaning up the surrounding living corpses. The remaining few jumping zombies in the cave, as well as the living corpses that didn't have much fighting strength, were quickly eliminated by them. Unfortunately, the courage of these zombies was absorbed by the Zombie King and used to evolve into Flying Stiff. Li Mu didn't get any benefits at all. After dealing with these troubles, the underground cave that was abnormally noisy suddenly became quiet. Amitba? Huiyuan walked to senior brother Qin's corpse, sighed and said, "On the path of cultivation, benefactor Qin couldn't resist the temptation." Li Mu also didn't expect senior brother Qin's change. Although he didn't know him for long, Li Mu's impression of him was very good. His temperament was indifferent, and he was amiable to everyone. He was offended by Wu Bo several times, but he didn't get angry. Li Mu didn't expect that he actually colluded with this zombie king that gave birth to intelligence, and secretly harmed the cultivators who came here to remove corpses. A dignified disciple of Fulu school was actually reduced to heretical cultivation. It made people sigh and feel pity. The cruelty of the cultivation world was once again vividly displayed in front of Li Mu's eyes. Li Qing cultivated bitterly for several years to reach the spirit realm. Ren Yuan could shorten this time to half a month or even 10 days by taking people's souls for cultivation. This kind of temptation wasn't something that everyone could withstand. Li Mu felt more and more that old Wang was right. The essence of cultivation was the law of the jungle. Li Mu himself didn't have to harm others, but he couldn't guarantee that others wouldn't harm him. Senior brother Qin had given him a great warning. When encountering cultivators, even if the other party had no ill intentions, he still had to be careful and vigilant. He could not easily trust others. While Li Mu was lost in thought, there was a sudden movement in one of the passages. Li Mu's expression changed slightly, and the golden light on his body became even brighter. In the blink of an eye, a figure appeared at the entrance of the passage. Xuandu's bald head was particularly conspicuous under the illumination of the Buddha's light. He glanced around the cave, and when he saw Li Mu, he was stunned at first, and then his face showed great joy. He murmured, "Benefactor Li's root of wisdom is so deep. I was wrong last time." Seeing Xuandu, Li Mu quickly retracted his Buddha's aura to avoid being discovered. Huiyuan said in surprise, "Martial Uncle Xuandu, you're here too." "It's martial nephew Huiyuan." Xuandu touched Huiyuan's bald head and said, "Yesterday, I happened to pass by here and found the corpse aura rising to the sky, so I came down to take a look. I didn't expect to get lost in this cave, and found my way here by following the Buddha's aura. We're also here to remove the corpse." Huiyuan smiled, and then thought of something and said nervously, "Martial Uncle, there's a zombie here. It has evolved into a flying stiff and escaped. We have to get rid of it quickly, or more innocent people will suffer." Xuandu looked around and said, "Let's go out first." Before leaving, Li Qing threw out a few Fulu cards and burned the zombie in the cave, as well as senior brother Qin's corpse, to ashes. The corpse poison of a flying stiff was even more potent than that of a jumping stiff. He died at the hands of a flying stiff. Only by burning him on the spot would he not turn into a zombie and cause trouble. After doing all this, the four of them walked out of the cave through the tunnel they came from. Xuandu nagged at Li Mu along the way. "Benefactor Li, with your wisdom, it's a pity that you don't cultivate Buddhism. Are you really not going to reconsider?" "Sorry, I'm not reconsidering. If you have any conditions, you can tell me. We can negotiate." "Can I not shave my head?" "Yes." "Can I not live in a temple?" "Of course you can." Can I marry a wife? This? I really can't. Then there's nothing to discuss. No matter how eloquent Xuandu was, he still couldn't convince Li Mu. The moment they walked out of the tunnel and saw the light of day again, Xuandu sighed and said, "Everyone in the world is amused by lust. Benefactor Li, your wisdom is so profound. Can't you be an exception?" Li Mu said, "Master, you've misjudged me. I don't have any wisdom. I'm just a layman." Xuandu opened his mouth to say something, but Li Qing looked at him indifferently and said, "He doesn't want to become a monk. Master, please don't force him." Xuandu looked at Li Qing and then at Li Mu. As if he understood something, he sighed deeply and said, "In that case, I won't force you anymore." Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief. He was still a little afraid of Xuandu, who liked to use force when he couldn't reason with him. Xuandu didn't mention the matter of Li Mu becoming a monk anymore. He said, "I still have a request. I hope you can agree." After all, this monk had saved his life. Li Mu said, "As long as it's not about becoming a monk, everything can be discussed." Xuandu smiled and looked at Li Mu. He asked, "The scripture that you're cultivating shouldn't be that basic scripture, right?" Since he couldn't hide it anymore, Li Mu might as well confess. He simply said, "It was a snowy winter. An old monk." Li Qing glanced at Li Mu and didn't say anything. After a while, Xuandu shook his head and said, "I'm not coveting your scripture. It's just that I just saw the light of Buddha that was activated by the scripture, and it was extraordinary. The abbot of Jinshan Temple was injured by a heretical cultivation several months ago, and his cultivation foundation was destroyed. This light of Buddha contains a mysterious power that I can't see through. Perhaps it can help him repair his foundation and get rid of his old problems." Xuandu saved his life. Using this opportunity, Li Mu could repay the favor. Li Mu thought for a while and said, "Of course I can save him, but my mana is weak. I might disappoint you." Xuandu smiled and said, "When the time comes, you can borrow my mana. Even if it doesn't work, the Jinshan Temple will still owe you a favor." Li Mu nodded and said, "Then when I return to the county government, I'll pay a visit to the Jinshan Temple." Huiyuan scratched his bald head and said, "This scripture is so powerful. That winter, Benefactor Li must have met a Buddhist monk." Xuandu smiled and didn't say anything. On the day Li Mu stayed in the Jinshan Temple, the Buddha statue in the temple glowed for no reason, indicating that a new scripture was coming out. That incident still troubled the monks in the temple. At this moment, Xuandu already had an answer in his heart. However, he didn't ask further, nor did he say much. He only looked at Li Mu with pity in his eyes. Li Mu stood at the entrance of the underground karst cave and looked around. He found that this place was very different from when they came in. The ground they were standing on was charred black. The surrounding trees were also emitting wisps of black smoke. It was as if a fierce battle had just taken place. The residual mana fluctuations and the chaotic spiritual chi of heaven and earth also proved this point. Li Mu looked around and saw a familiar figure under a tree. Wu Bo was lying under the tree. His body was full of bloody holes. His body had shrunk by at least half. His essence blood had been sucked dry. His physical strength was gone, and his primordial spirit was nowhere to be found. He was obviously like senior brother Qin, sucked dry by the zombie. Huiyuan murmured, "Is Constable Wu still alive?" Cultivators in the assembled God state needed to gather their 3 souls into a primordial spirit. After the primordial spirit was formed, as long as it was not destroyed, even if the body was destroyed, it could be reborn. Li Qing took out an immortal guiding talisman. Li Mu understood and took a few steps forward. He took a strand of hair from Wu Bo's body and wrapped it around the immortal guiding talisman. Then he threw the Fulu into the air. The immortal guiding talisman drawn by Li Qing's assembled God state cultivation could sense a wide range. As long as Wu Bo's primordial spirit was still there, it could trigger a reaction from the Fulu. The paper crane folded by the immortal guiding talisman flapped its wings and flew into the air. After circling in place, it fell straight down and landed on Wu Bo's body. In such a short time, Wu Bo's primordial spirit could not have escaped the detection range of the immortal guiding talisman. Fu Lu did not have any reaction, which meant that his primordial spirit had also dissipated. In other words, Wu Bo was dead. He was completely dead. His soul was scattered, and his body was dead. Chapter 99. Huiyuan looked at Wu Bo's corpse, put his palms together and said with pity, "If Constable Wu hadn't escaped, he wouldn't have ended up like this." Ba. Xuandu made a Buddhist salute with one hand and said, "Every peck and every drink has its own destiny. He has no one to blame but himself." Wu Bo was dead, but Li Mu wasn't sad at all. Li Mu had no enmity with him, but he tried to kill Li Mu time and time again. Even if the zombie didn't kill him, Li Mu would find a chance to kill him sooner or later. He wasn't bloodthirsty, but he wouldn't show mercy to those who wanted his life. The flying stiff that had just evolved seemed to prefer the pure yang body and the earth elemental body. Otherwise, Li Mu would have been in big trouble just now. Xuandu closed his eyes and sensed. He looked in a certain direction and said, "That zombie fled to the west. I have to chase after him to prevent him from harming more people." Li Mu looked at his back and reminded, "This zombie has already evolved into the flying stiff. Master Xuandu, be careful." The flying stiff that had just evolved could rival the supernatural powers of Taoism and the golden body of Buddhism. Xuandu's realm was the golden body. He could easily crush shape-shifting monsters, but he might not be at an advantage against the flying stiff. Huiyuan smiled and said, "Benefactor Li, don't worry. Martial Uncle Xuandu has already attained the golden body for many years. He can deal with this flying stiff." Hearing Huiyuan's words, Li Mu was no longer worried about Xuandu. He looked at Li Qing and asked, "Boss, what do we do now?" Li Qing thought for a while and said, "Let's go back to Qinghe village first." When they came, there were 5 of them, but when they went back, there were only 3 left. This was something they had never expected before coming here. The zombie horde was destroyed, but the flying stiff managed to escape. Not only did they fail to collect courage, but they also lost 2 assembled divinity cultivators. It did not seem like they had one. When they returned to Qinghe village, Hanja greeted them from afar and asked, "Why are you guys back so soon? How was it? Did you guys eliminate the zombie horde?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes, a flying stiff escaped. The Master Xuandu of the Jinshan Temple has gone after it." Hanja looked around and asked, "Where are Wu Bo and Senior Brother Qin? Did they also go after the flying stiff?" Li Mu, "Wu Bo is dead." "What?" Hanja's eyes immediately widened. He said in disbelief, "How could Wu Bo be dead? Who killed him?" Li Mu said, "That flying stiff." Wu Bo's death shocked Hanja, but it was only shock. Even though he and Wu Bo were both disciples of the Talisman sect, they didn't belong to the same faction, so there wasn't any friendship between them. Conversely, there was even some enmity between them, so he'd been unable to get used to Wu Bo's actions since a long time ago. Even so, the news of his death at the hands of the flying stiff still shocked Hanja for a long time. After a while, he accepted the reality and asked, "Where is Senior Brother Qin? Why didn't he come back?" Li Mu could see that Hanja and Senior Brother Qin had a very good relationship. For a moment, he did not know how to answer. In the end, it was Huiyuan who sighed and said, "Senior Brother Qin colluded with the zombie and lured us to die underground. Constable Wu almost died at his hands. Senior Brother Qin later had his essence and primordial spirit sucked by the flying stiff and died in the underground karst cave." "Impossible!" Hanja's expression changed greatly. He grabbed Huiyuan's collar and said angrily, "How could Senior Brother Qin do such a thing? What nonsense are you talking about?" Ba. Huiyuan chanted the name of Buddha and did not say anything. He silently lowered his head and let Hanja grab his collar. "What he said is true." Li Qing looked at Hanja and said, "Senior Brother Qin has long been reduced to a heretical cultivation. He lured cultivators underground to let the zombie suck their essence." Hanja's face was pale. He slowly released his grip on Huiyuan's collar and murmured, "Impossible. This is impossible. Senior brother Qin can't be that kind of person. He can't do such a thing. He shook his head and retreated. In the end, he disappeared from the sight of Li Mu and the others. Huiyuan took a step forward but was stopped by Li Mu. Li Mu sighed and said, "Let him be alone for a while." When Wu Bo was alive, he was hated by both humans and dogs. No one cared about his death. But senior brother Qin's death was a great blow to Han Zhe. For hours later, when Li Mu found him, he was sitting on the highest roof of the village. His eyes were red and swollen like peaches. Li Mu sat beside him and asked, "Are you crying?" Han Zhe wiped his eyes and said through gritted teeth, "No." Li Mu said, "You're still denying it. Even your voice is hoarse." Han Zhe glared at him and asked, "Li Mu, you are so annoying. Why do Miss Qing, Lady Lu, and that little girl all like you so much?" Li Mu shrugged and said, "Maybe because I'm good-looking." Han Zhe turned his head and spat. "Bah!" Li Mu looked indifferent. "You can't change this fact even if you spit on me." Han Zhe looked at him and suddenly said with a look of realization, "I know why they all like you." "Why?" "Because you are shameless." Li Mu said indifferently, "If a tree doesn't want its bark, it will die. If a person is shameless, he is invincible. Maybe girls like shameless people like me." Han Zhe said, "I remember you were not like this before." Li Mu looked at him and said, "People always change." Han Zhe lowered his head and said after a moment, "Yes, you will change, I will change, and senior brother Qin will also change. He used to be the most hardworking person in our branch." "Why do you think he became a heretical cultivation?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "He said that no matter how hard he worked, he would still be overtaken by others. So he didn't want to work hard anymore." Old Wang once said to Li Mu that the path of cultivation was unfair. Some people had ordinary talent. Others could reach the realm in 1 year, but they needed to cultivate for 10 years or even decades. Some people had ordinary backgrounds. With the same talent, others had the support of their sect and elders. On the path of cultivation, they did not lack resources. 1 year of cultivation was still equivalent to 10 years or decades of cultivation for them. In this cruel reality, if one could not resist the temptation and made a mistake, they would become like senior brother Qin. For people like Li Qing and Han Zhe, who could endure loneliness and cultivate arduously, all of them had a tenacious heart. The degree of condensation of the mana they cultivated was also far from being comparable to those who achieved rapid heretical cultivation. Han Zhe raised his head and said, "Senior brother Qin has always been very good to me. He was like a brother to me, guiding me in my cultivation. When I was bullied by other brothers, he was also the one who stood up for me." Although senior brother Qin had been reduced to a heretical cultivation, Li Mu saw how well he treated Han Zhe. He led all of them to the underground karst cave and only left Han Zhe here because he did not want him to be involved. Han Zhe let out a long sigh and said, "Senior brother Qin's matter. I really don't know how to tell the other brothers." Li Mu patted his shoulder and said, "No one wanted this to happen. My condolences." "My condolences. It's easy to say." Han Zhe shook his head and said, "Senior brother Qin was my guide in cultivation. The first time I gathered qi, it was with the help of senior brother Qin that I succeeded. In this world, other than my parents and master, he is the person who treats me the best. You don't have a guide in cultivation, so you can't understand this feeling." Li Mu looked at him and said, "Who says I don't?" Han Zhe was stunned for a moment. As if he thought of something, his expression became even more bitter. Li Mu looked at him and asked, "Why don't you ask who my guide is?" "I don't know, and I don't want to know." Han Zhe's bitter face showed an angry expression and said, "Go away. I don't want to see you again." Li Mu smiled and said, "The one who guided me on the path of cultivation is my family's leader." "Did I ask you?" Han Zhe angrily said, "Get out of here, right now." Chapter 100. After Li Mu's consolation, Han Zhe looked much better. Li Mu, on the other hand, was in low spirits. Wu Bo and senior brother Qin had taught Li Mu a good lesson during this operation. Zombies were scary, but what was even scarier than zombies was the complicated human heart. The outside world was too complicated. After leaving home for 3 days, Li Mu began to miss Lu Hanyan, Wan Wan, Zhang Shan, Li Si, and old Wang Hanja had already calmed down. He jumped down from the roof and said, "I'm going back to the sect to bring back the news of senior brother Qin and Wu Bo. I'll leave this place to you." Apart from the flying stiff that had escaped, all the zombies in the underground cave had been eliminated by Li Mu and the others. Clear River Village was no longer in any danger. With a few cultivators stationed, it was enough to deal with all kinds of situations. Xuandu only returned to Clear River Village when it was close to evening. He looked a little tired. He shook his head and said, "The flying stiff ran too fast. I couldn't catch up to it." The flying stiff was called a flying stiff because it could fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. Its strength was not on the same level as a jumping stiff. Buddhist or Taoist fourth realm cultivators might have the strength to kill it, but it would be extremely difficult to catch it. Li Mu sighed. The courage that was in his hands had flown away just like that. The courage of the nearby walking corpses and jumping zombies had all been absorbed by the zombie king for evolution. If Li Mu wanted to collect the courage, he could only go deeper. But that would also increase the risk. Li Mu's face showed a thoughtful expression. He was hesitating whether he should take this risk. Xuandu looked at him and suddenly asked, "Young benefactor, do you want to take the zombie soul for your own cultivation?" Li Mu nodded and did not deny it. "Over the past few days, apart from the zombies, I've also collected quite a lot of courage. I originally wanted to train my body, but I think you need it more. I'll give it to you." Xuandu took out a jade stone from his bosom and said, "Is this enough? How could I?" Li Mu hurriedly took the jade from Xuandu's hands. After examining it, he found that the jade contained a lot of courage, which should be enough for him to refine the anger. There should still be a lot left. He smiled and said, "It's enough, it's enough. Thank you, Master Xuandu." Xuandu smiled and said, "There's no need to thank me. After all, this penniless monk has a favor to ask of you." Hanja had returned to White Cloud Mountain's ancestral court. Li Mu had also obtained the boldness he needed from Xuandu. After discussing with Li Qing, she decided to let Li Mu return to the county office first and report Wu Bo's matter. After all, Wu Bo was still a constable of the Yangqiu County government in name. His background in Fulu school was not weak. If he died in an accident here, the Yamen would probably have to give an explanation to the Fulu school. Li Mu could not help much here. His biggest goal had been achieved, so there was no need to stay in Zhou County. Xuandu put his palms together and said, "This penniless monk will stay here for a few more days. After returning to Yangqiu County, I'll go to the county office to invite you, young benefactor." After the zombies in the underground karst cave were wiped out, Qinghe village welcomed a peaceful night. Not a single zombie came to invade. The next morning, Li Mu bid farewell to Li Qing and Huiyuan. He used the spirit travel talisman to travel for several hours. When it was almost dark in the afternoon, he finally arrived at the county office. After hearing Li Mu's words, Zhang County magistrates jumped up from his chair in shock. He said in disbelief, "What? You said Wu Bo is dead?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Constable Wu died in the hands of a flying stiff. That shouldn't be." Zhang County magistrates frowned and said, "Although Wu Bo is annoying, he has the strength. How could he die so easily?" In fact, Li Mu had the same feeling. Although he didn't like Wu Bo, he had to admit that Wu Bo was very strong. Although he was in the spirit-gathering realm, it would be difficult for a theurgy cultivator to gain an advantage against him. Even when senior brother Qin ambushed him from behind and crushed his heart, he was still able to survive. As a core disciple of Fulu school and a grandfather in the manifestation realm, he must have had many life-saving tricks up his sleeve. His death was indeed a little careless. Either Wu Bo was strong in appearance but weak in reality, he was an idiot, or the flying stiff was too strong. But no matter what, the fact that Wu Bo was dead couldn't be changed. Zhang County magistrate sighed and muttered, "This is troublesome. If he dies at this time, How will I explain it to Fulu School? Li Mu asked. Sir, are you afraid that Fulu School will make things difficult for the county office? Afraid? When have I ever been afraid of anyone? Zhang County Magistrate snorted coldly and said, Behind my county is the Great Zhou Court. Why would I be afraid of Fulu School? He coughed softly and said, But I've been busy with official business recently. I don't have time to deal with them. If someone from Fulu School comes, just say I'm not here. Although Fulu School and Great Zhou Court cooperated a lot, they weren't very close. The court didn't like Fulu School's independence and lack of control. Fulu School was dissatisfied that the court didn't cooperate with them in recruiting disciples. While they cooperated, there was also hostility between them. This could be seen from the zombie disaster in Zhou County. If Fulu School wholeheartedly wanted to help the court, they only needed to send a Good Fortune Realm or Dongshan cultivator. One person would be enough to solve the crisis in Zhou County. They wouldn't just send out these Zhenshin and remarkable ability disciples, which would cause the disaster in Zhou County to continue unquenchable. Li Mu walked out of the front office. Zhang Shan was waiting outside. He couldn't wait and asked, Is Fei Bo really dead? Li Mu nodded and said, He was bitten by a zombie. He's completely dead. I personally burned his body. Zhang Shan's eyes widened and he muttered, I told you that evil would be repaid with evil. Old Wang didn't believe me. Li Mu still had some questions he wanted to ask Old Wang. He asked, Where's Old Wang? I didn't see him in the guard room. Zhang Shan said, Old Wang asked for leave. He just left this morning. Li Mu was stunned for a moment. He asked, Leave? Where to? He said he was going out to visit relatives. Zhang Shan sighed and said regretfully, Old Wang actually has relatives. Do you think he'll leave his money to his relatives after he dies? Old Wang wasn't in the county office. He didn't know when he would come back. Li Mu suppressed the questions in his heart and went home first. Last night, he refined the fear in his body and successfully condensed the fourth spirit. After getting rid of the Taoist priest's death curse, Li Mu felt unprecedentedly relaxed. Without the seven spirits, the physical body would deteriorate rapidly. Now that Li Mu had condensed the fourth spirit, the speed of his physical body's deterioration was far slower than the speed of his cultivation. It was like pouring water into a pool and releasing water at the same time. Before condensing the fourth spirit, the speed of pouring water couldn't catch up with the speed of releasing water. After condensing the fourth spirit, it would be reversed. As for the remaining three spirits, there was no rush to condense them. Li Mu could first condense his soul and find a chance to do so in the future. Refining the soul and condensing the soul were both cultivation realms and cultivation methods. Refining the soul before condensing the soul, or condensing the soul before refining the soul. There were some unorthodox cultivators who didn't refine the soul, condense the soul, or condense the spirit, and only relied on qi cultivation to reach the middle three realms. However, such people were rare. After all, the cultivation methods of Taoism were easy to obtain. Refining the spirit first, then condensing the soul, and finally condensing the spirit was the most scientific cultivation method. It could increase the cultivator's strength to the greatest extent. If one had mana but not condensed the primordial spirit, the soul would be weak. Once the physical body was destroyed, there was no other way but to become a ghost cultivator. After condensing the spirit last night, there was still a small amount of spirit left in the jade stone that Xuandu gave him. It was enough for Wanwan and Lu Hanyen to refine one spirit each. When Li Mu was about to reach the door, he saw Wanwan sitting on the steps of the door. She rested her chin on one hand and looked at the people on the street in boredom. Li Mu walked to her side and sat down. He asked, "What are you thinking about?" "Young master." Wanwan's body trembled and she jumped up. She said in surprise, "Young master, you're back. Miss has been worried sick about you these past few days." Hurried footsteps came from the courtyard. When they reached the door, they slowed down. Lu Hanyen pushed the door open and walked out. She said, "I wasn't worried about him. I was just afraid that if he was bitten by a zombie, you wouldn't have a place to eat in the future." Lu Hanyen's voice was filled with resentment. It was unclear whether she was still angry about the last time or angry that Li Mu left without saying goodbye. Li Mu rubbed his stomach and changed the topic. He said, "Is there anything to eat? After a day of traveling, I'm starving." Lu Hanyan glared at him and said, "Go change your clothes and wash your hands. I just cooked noodles." Lu Hanyan's noodles were also very delicious. Li Mu ate 3 bowls in one breath. She glanced at Li Mu and asked, "When did you become like Wanwan?" Li Mu drank all the soup in his bowl and wiped his mouth. He took out a piece of jade and handed it to Lu Hanyan. Lu Hanyan reached out and took it. She rolled her eyes at him and said, "Don't think that I can forgive you just because you gave me a piece of jade. If you leave without saying goodbye again next time, I'll pretend that I don't have you as a friend." Li Mu explained, "This is not an ordinary jade. Didn't you think that your cultivation speed was too slow? The power in this jade can help you and Wanwan refine your soul." Lu Hanyan was stunned. She asked, "This is why you went to Zhou County?" Li Mu nodded and said, "However, when it comes to cultivation, it's best to be down to earth. Don't always think about shortcuts. There's a huge difference between the mana that comes from hard work and the mana that comes from trickery. It's also a great training for one's temperament." Even though Li Mu believed in Lu Hanyan, he still told her about senior brother Qin's example. It was Li Mu who guided her on the path of cultivation. He had the responsibility to remind her not to go astray. Lu Hanyan said, "Don't worry. Even if I have to take a shortcut, I won't take this kind of shortcut." Li Mu said, "Other than this, there are no shortcuts to cultivation. Of course, you're different. You have other shortcuts." Lu Hanyan's eyes lit up. She asked, "What shortcuts?" Chapter 101. Since he was already familiar with Lu Hanyan, Li Mu told her the truth. "You have a pure yin body. There's no better shortcut than finding a pure yang body for dual cultivation." Lu Hanyan spat. "Bah, you wish. I didn't say it was me." Li Mu looked at her and comforted her. "Don't worry. Didn't I tell you that you're not my type?" Lu Hanyan took a deep breath and forced herself to keep smiling. She asked, "Is Arrestor Li your type?" "Not really." Li Mu thought for a while and said, "If a woman has the boss's strength, Wanwan's personality, and your money." Lu Hanyan snorted. "Dream on." After eating 3 bowls of noodles in a row, Li Mu felt a little thirsty. He asked Lu Hanyan, "Is there any tea?" Lu Hanyan put away the bowls and chopsticks and said coldly, "Do you want some water from the pot?" Lu Hanyan was really a woman who liked to get angry. Unfortunately, she had already refined the second soul, so her anger didn't show on the outside. Li Mu couldn't absorb it anymore. All the cultivators in the county government had gone to Zhou County. Old Wang had also gone out to visit his relatives. The county government was seriously understaffed. Li Mu was temporarily transferred to the household office to take over Old Wang's work. In fact, Old Wang's clerical work was the busiest in the county government. Zhang Shan and Li Si had finished patrolling. They were either sleeping in the guard room or in the brothel. Old Wang's work, however, was not as easy. Li Mu had been sorting out the past case files, managing the household registration files, and coordinating the cases reported to the county government. He was so busy during the day that he didn't even have time to read books. "I think it's good to be a clerk." Lu Hanyan and Li Mu had different ideas. After dinner, they sat in the yard, fanning themselves with a small fan, and said, "You don't have to patrol, kill zombies, or catch monsters. You just have to sit in the guard room every day. After 2 years, you can get a wife. Isn't that good?" Li Mu was reading a book and casually said, "That will have to wait until I get a wife first." What Lu Hanyan said actually made a lot of sense. Ordinary people just wanted to live a stable life. Old Wang had been in this position all his life. Although he had not stepped into the path of cultivation, he had lived longer than Wu Bo and senior brother Qin combined. Lu Hanyan probed, "What do you think of our Wanwan?" Li Mu flipped through the pages and asked without raising his eyelids, "What do you mean?" Lu Hanyan said, "Wanwan is 16 this year. In 2 years, she will be 18. She will be at the age of marriage. At that time I will marry Wanwan to you. What do you think? Li Mu put down the book and asked doubtfully, "What about you?" Lu Hanyan glared at him and said, "What are you dreaming about?" Li Mu explained, "I mean, if Wanwan gets married, you will have no one to serve you, right? I can live well alone." "I don't need anyone to serve me," Lu Hanyan said. "Besides, Wanwan is my sister. I have never treated her as a maid." She looked at Li Mu and said, "Don't change the subject. What do you think of Wanwan?" Li Mu opened the book again and said, "She's very good. Although the little girl was a little fierce and dull, she was well-behaved and obedient. She looked a little childish now, but a girl would change 18 times between childhood and womanhood. Who knew what she would grow up to be in 2 years?" Lu Hanyan asked, "Do you mean that you agree to marry Wanwan?" Although Wanwan was gentle and well-behaved, Li Mu had always treated her as a younger sister and had never had any thoughts in that regard. Instead, he often compared Lu Hanyan and Li Qing together. It was just a comparison. In the past few months, he had been thinking about how to live and had never really considered this matter. He was not Li Si. He was not so careless that he only had a few months to live at most. He still had the leisure to fall in love. Li Mu shook his head and said, "I just want to cultivate for the time being. I haven't thought about these things." Lu Hanyan said, "The past is the past. Now that you have condensed the 4 spirits, you can think about it. Life is not only about cultivation. Haven't you thought about the future?" "The future?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "In the future, I want to make a lot of money and buy a big house. And then, hire some maids and servants and experience the feeling of being served by others. And marry a few beautiful wives." Li Mu sometimes wondered if God felt that he had suffered too much in his previous life, so he was given another life to make up for it. If that was really the case, then he must think about some things that he had not dared to think about before. If conditions permitted, he wanted to marry a woman with a high cultivation, a gentle woman, and a rich woman. When he was bored, the family could gather together to play mahjong to pass the time and help him fulfill his love and lust. Wouldn't that be perfect? Lu Hanyan scoffed at Li Mu's dream. She said, "Ha men." Then she floated away. After the Fulu school intervened, the situation in Zhou County reversed. The people of Yangqiu County no longer panicked. The shops on the street reopened. Because of the people's vengeful spending, business was even better than before. She had endless work to do. Every day, news about Zhou County would gather at the county office. Hanja sent a letter saying that after learning about Wu Bo's death, the elder Wu of the 7th branch was furious. He went down the mountain in person and led many cultivators of the 7th branch to search the entire Zhou County. Under the fury of the master of creation realm, the zombie disaster in Zhou County ended almost without any suspense. White zombies, black zombies, jumping zombies, and even new corpses that were still in the graves and had just been condensed by the corpse chi were dug out and burned. After this incident, there would probably not be any more zombies in Zhou County for a long time. At that moment, Elder Wu was chasing after the flying stiff that killed Wu Bo. The other 2 flying stiff in Zhou County had died in his hands 3 days ago. The group of zombies had no leader, so they were easily eliminated by other cultivators. From another perspective, Wu Bo's death was not completely meaningless. At the very least, the people of Zhou County benefited from his death. If not for Wu Bo's death, the Fulu school would not have sent a master of creation realm. The zombie disaster in Zhou County had temporarily come to an end. Li Mu was writing a notice and asked Zhang Shan and Li Si to post it at the entrance of the street. The notice was written by Zhang County magistrates. The content was to advise the people that if there was a funeral in their family, they must report it to the government. After the government checked the grave, they would bury the dead. It was forbidden to bury the dead casually, and violators would be severely punished. After all, the landlord Zhang of Zhang village had buried his father in a corpse breeding ground and lost his life in vain. After that, the zombie tide in Zhou County overflowed, and thousands of people died. It caused great panic in the counties of the North County. All of this was a warning to Zhang County magistrates. The location of the mass grave outside the city was very particular. The terrain there was special, so it would not accumulate a trace of murderous aura. The possibility of the corpses buried there was zero. Some poor people who could not afford a feng shui master would choose to bury their dead there. But if they did not understand feng shui and coincidentally buried their loved ones in a place where they should not be buried, the consequences would be unimaginable. Landlord Zhang was a good example. Li Mu took out a notice and wrote 2 lines on it to warn the people. There are thousands of tombs, but safety is the most important. If the funeral is not standard, the family will cry. Old Wang was not in the government office. His room on duty temporarily belonged to Li Mu. Li Mu found a book on feng shui tombs from the bookshelf and studied it seriously. Qi will scatter when it is carried by the wind, and the water will stop when it is carried by the boundary. The ancients gathered the qi and did not scatter, and when it was carried out, it stopped. This is why feng shui is called feng shui. In feng shui, obtaining the water is the best and hiding the wind is second. 10 taboos of tombs. First, do not come from the back. Second, do not open the front. Third, do not bow in the direction of the water. Fourth, do not sweep the cave. Fifth, do not let the dragon and tiger go straight. 8 dragons direction formula. Touch the acupoint and stand in the direction must be connected. The 8 dragons must be separated clearly. The fire dragon must not be created. The water restrains it. The wood will help the fire dragon rise. When the people moved or buried their graves, they had to report to the government office. Although it could reduce the safety risks, the government office's workload was also increased. Moreover, there had to be professionals who understood feng shui and tombs. This was also a very deep knowledge. In the government office, other than Old Wang, it seemed that only Hanja had dabbled in it. Li Mu memorized these rules and taboos. Perhaps they would be useful in the future. He looked for a while and heard a slight noise outside the duty room. At the same time, he also sensed a few familiar auras. Li Mu walked out of the duty room and saw Li Qing, Hanja, and Huiyuan standing in the courtyard. Chapter 102. Li Mu walked into the courtyard and said with a smile, "Boss, you're back." Hanja looked at Li Mu and asked, "Can't you see us?" Huiyuan chanted the name of Buddha and sighed. "It's a pity that Constable Wu won't be able to come back." Hanja snorted coldly. "What's there to pity about him? He framed his colleagues and betrayed them. This kind of scum deserves to die. Thank you for your hard work." Constable Zhou came out of the room and shook his head. Good has its rewards, and evil has its consequences. Constable Wu is dead, so let's not talk about him anymore. Li Mu asked Huiyuan, "How's the situation in Zhou County?" A smile appeared on the little monk's face as he said, "The zombies and evil creatures in Zhou County have all been wiped out. The people who gathered there have also begun to return to their original villages. The disaster this time has been quelled." Li Mu asked again, "Has the flying stiff been caught?" Li Qing shook her head and said, "Elder Wu has been looking for it. It had been more than 10 days since the incident. It was impossible for a blessed realm expert to not be able to deal with a small flying stiff." Li Mu was puzzled and asked, "Is that zombie so powerful?" Li Qing explained, "If it was a head-on fight, of course it wouldn't be Elder Wu's match. But the flying stiff speed is even faster than Imperial Qi. It won't be easy for a blessed realm expert to catch it. As for the remaining flying stiff, the county governor and the experts from Fulu School would take care of it." Li Mu didn't want to think about it anymore. He smiled and said, "Don't worry about it. It's good that you guys came back safely." Li Qing seemed to be deep in thought, as if she had something on her mind. Li Mu asked, "Boss, is there anything else?" Li Qing said, "I keep having the feeling that something is not quite right." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "What's wrong?" "I don't know." Li Qing shook her head and said, "Maybe I'm thinking too much." Actually, Li Mu also felt that something was off. From the very beginning, the flying stiff hadn't paid much attention to Li Mu and the others. Instead, it had chased after Wu Bo relentlessly. Wu Bo had tried to escape twice. The first time he had been chased back, and the second time he had directly received a bento box. Moreover, after killing Wu Bo, the flying stiff chose to escape instead of returning to the cave to continue the slaughter. It didn't make sense. The latter could be explained by the flying stiff's fear of Xuandu, but the former, it didn't make sense for it to ignore Li Mu, who possessed a pure yang body. Instead, it cared so much about the earth elemental body. Could it be that the earth elemental body had some special attraction to it? The cultivation world didn't have any explanation for this for the time being. However, just like how they didn't know that glutinous rice had a restraining effect on zombies, there were still many things that humans didn't know about in the boundless universe. Perhaps Li Mu had unintentionally discovered another law of nature. It was a pity that old Wang wasn't here. Otherwise, Li Mu could have discussed this issue with him in depth. Li Mu sighed softly. It was also a pity that the flying stiff's courage was missing. If he could obtain the flying stiff's courage, it should be enough to support him until he reached the soul-condensing realm. North County. Yu County. Yu County was the easternmost county in North County. It was separated from Zhou County by several counties. Therefore, the zombie disaster in Zhou County didn't have much of an impact on Yu County. Up until now, there hadn't been a single case of a zombie harming anyone in Yu County. In a remote village in Yu County, a white-bearded old man in a Taoist robe took out a fulu from his pocket. He smiled at a few village women and said, "Use my talisman, and I guarantee that you'll be able to give birth to a fat boy in the future. How about it? A talisman only costs 2 copper coins. You won't lose out if you buy it with 2 copper coins. You won't be fooled with 2 copper coins." This Taoist priest was dressed very sloppily. Not only was his Taoist robe full of dirt, but there were also a few holes. He looked like a swindler. However, the few village women at the entrance of the village didn't doubt his words at all. There was no other reason. At the beginning, they also thought that this person was a swindler. However, when he revealed his miraculous ability to create words on a piece of paper, they immediately stopped doubting his words. Moreover, 2 copper coins wasn't much. If they were cheated, so be it. However, if what he said was true, wouldn't they have profited greatly? If they could give birth to a fat boy, they would be able to walk in the village with their heads held high. The old man in the Taoist robe distributed the fulu to the crowd and happily put away a few copper coins. He then looked at a woman and said, "Young lady, it's best if you don't go out for the next 2 days. From your looks, you'll be in for a bloody disaster in the next few days. Bah, 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 you jinx." The woman, who was standing by the side to watch the fun and didn't buy his talismans, spat and scolded him. She then prepared to go back to cook. However, after taking 2 steps, she suddenly twisted her foot and fell to the ground. Her palms were rubbed against the sand on the ground, leaving bloody marks. "Ah, you're so accurate. I'll buy one too. I'll buy one too. Leave one for me. I'll go home and withdraw money." Seeing this scene, the new wives who had been watching from the side immediately believed him. They all bought the fulu from the Taoist priest. After a while, the Taoist priest sold another stack of talismans. They were exorcism talismans, ghost exorcism talismans, embryo protection talismans, big fat boy talismans, and so on. The Taoist priest was counting the copper coins happily. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked at the sky. A black shadow was flying across the sky. "Why is there a flying stiff here?" The Taoist priest was puzzled. He pinched his fingers and calculated. The puzzlement on his face turned into surprise. He said in surprise, "Why can't I see it?" Not long after, another figure flew over and landed at the entrance of the village. It was an old man. He didn't have many wrinkles on his face and had a head of black and white hair. When the woman at the entrance of the village saw him, she immediately exclaimed, "Immortal Master!" The North County was where the ancestral court of Fulu School was located. When the people saw an immortal master descending from the sky, they wouldn't be too surprised. After the old man landed, he waved his sleeves. In the void in front of him, a still light appeared. In the light was a middle-aged man with a pale face. He looked at the crowd and asked, "Have you seen this person before?" No. Everyone shook their heads. The old man waved his hand again, and the light in the air disappeared. He looked at the sloppy Taoist priest indifferently and said to the village women, "Fulu is a way to communicate with gods and ghosts. Don't use it without permission, and don't believe the words of a swindler." "What? A swindler? The talisman that gave birth to my son is fake." "Swindler, refund?" The old Taoist who descended from the sky had the demeanor of a transcendent being. His Taoist robe fluttered in the wind. Clearly, he looked more like an immortal than the sloppy old Taoist. The moment he spoke, the woman who had just bought the talisman immediately believed him. She grabbed the sloppy old Taoist's collar and clamored for a refund. The sloppy Taoist priest was anxious. He pointed at the old man and said unhappily, "We're all in the same business. Why do you have to do this?" The old man glanced at him and ignored him. He rose into the air again and wanted to leave, but the old man grabbed his ankle. "Come down. So what if you're in the Fulu school? So what if you're in the creation realm?" The sloppy Taoist priest grabbed his ankle and said angrily, "I'm telling you, if you don't make it clear today, don't think about leaving." The old man didn't expect that he would be pulled down by the Taoist priest. Moreover, the other party could tell his cultivation realm, but he couldn't see through the Taoist priest at all. This meant that the other party's cultivation was above his. He looked frightened and took a Fulu from a woman. After holding it, he found that the spiritual chi in the Fulu didn't dissipate. It was not an ordinary talisman. He immediately bowed to the Taoist priest and said, "I didn't see it clearly. Please don't blame me." The Taoist priest snorted and said, "Say it again." "Is my talisman fake?" The old man's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He quickly said, "It's real, it's real." Seeing that the women who were talking and laughing with him just now were looking at him with fear, the Taoist priest looked at the old man with dissatisfaction and muttered, "Meddling in other people's business." He put his hand on the old man's shoulder and the two figures disappeared, leaving only the shocked villagers. Several miles away from the village, the two figures appeared again. With this move, they could move several miles away. The elder Wu's face was pale. He looked at the sloppy Taoist priest with even more respect. The sloppy Taoist priest asked, "Are you chasing that flying stiff?" The elder Wu quickly said, "It killed countless people in Zhou County. My grandson was also killed by it. If this monster is not eliminated, the North County will not be peaceful." The sloppy Taoist priest looked at him and said, "Forget it. The former headmaster of the Fulu school has done me a favor. Today I will help you count it." He counted with his fingers. After a while, he shook his head and said, "If you continue to chase it, your grandson won't be the only one who will die in its hands." Seeing the Taoist priest counting with his fingers, the elder Wu knew that he must be a Dongxian. Dongxian meant to have insight into the mysteries of the world. Dongxian cultivators could observe the stars, know the time, predict the future, and seek good luck and avoid evil. Since he said so, it meant that if he continued to chase it, he would be in danger. The elder Wu said in disbelief, "That flying stiff has just evolved." The sloppy Taoist priest did not say much. He waved his sleeve and a light screen appeared in the void. Compared to the light screen of elder Wu, this light screen was clearer. It was not static, but dynamic. In the light screen there was a dense forest. A figure slowly walked in the dense forest filled with fog. It was the flying stiff. The flying stiff, who was walking, suddenly raised its head. Its gaze seemed to be able to see through the light screen and saw the sloppy Taoist priest and the elder Wu. The next moment, the light screen shattered into countless pieces. "It broke your mystic light technique." The elder Wu's expression changed greatly. He said in a trembling voice, "How could this be?" The sloppy Taoist priest's gaze was deep. He said, "Even I can't calculate its origin. If you want to get rid of it, you'd better ask your peak masters to come." Chapter 103. The incident in Zhou County had ended, and Wu Bo had died at the hands of the flying stiff. Li Mu finally had some free time. Over the past few months, The cases in Yangqiu County had come one after another. It was rare for him to have so much free time. Since there was nothing to do, Li Mu could calm down and think about his own cultivation. In ancient times, humans began to cultivate. The birth of Taoism was less than 1,000 years ago. Before Taoism, there were many different kinds of cultivation methods. Today, there were many cultivation methods other than Buddhism. However, Taoism's supernatural powers were mysterious and unpredictable. It was recognized by the cultivation world. As time passed, other cultivation methods were gradually eliminated or became a minority. The foundation of Taoism's cultivation was to control one's own body. That was why there were soul refining and soul consolidating. The order of soul refining and soul consolidating could be reversed. It was even possible to skip soul refining and go straight to soul consolidating. Refining one's soul was to better control one's body. During the process of refining one's soul, one's mana would also increase by 7 leaps, which was equivalent to a month or even several months of guiding and refining qi. As a result, very few cultivators would skip this step. However, Li Mu and Lu Hanyan were different. They already had souls in their bodies. They could just refine them directly. Li Mu's soul had been scattered and needed to be reunited. The first 4 souls were already difficult to reunite. The last 3 souls had to be born from evil, love, and lust. It was much more difficult than normal people's soul refining. The last 3 souls needed long-term planning. Li Mu could choose to reunite his soul first. When the time was right, he could make up for the 3 souls. However, if he did that, his cultivation path would always be flawed before he could fully refine the 7 souls. His mana would not be as strong as those who had refined the 7 souls. However, this was something that could not be helped. After careful consideration, Li Mu decided to proceed with the last part of his cultivation. Soul consolidating was similar to soul refining. It was a process of refining one's 3 souls. When all 3 souls were refined, one could try to fuse them into a primordial spirit and break through to the assembled spirit state. Li Mu flipped open the Taoist book in his hands. On the 2nd page was the method and incantation to condense the soul. The 3rd day of the month, the 13th day of the month, and the evening of the 23rd day of the month. It's at this time, the 3 souls are uncertain. The spirit is floating, the light of the fetus is released, and the spirit is disturbed. Supreme profound palace, deep yellow, beginning green, inner refinement of the 3 souls, tranquil fetal light, divine treasure jade room, born with me, do not act rashly. The best time to refine the 7 spirits was at the beginning of the moon, the end of the moon, and the end of the moon. The best time to refine the 3 spirits was at the 3rd, 13th, and 23rd evening of the month. Today was the 5th, so he had missed the best time to condense his soul. He had to wait for another 7 days. Li Mu searched Old Wang's bookshelf to see if there was any way for him to quickly collect love and lust. He didn't expect that he actually found it. According to an obscure Taoist book, some cultivators felt that the process of refining the 3 spirits was too slow and would choose to directly disperse them. After that, they would enter the secular world and specifically seduce ignorant girls. After cheating them of their feelings and bodies for a short period of time, they would heartlessly abandon them, making these girls hate them. This way, they would be able to collect love, lust, and hatred at the same time, condensing the final 3 spirits in one go. Li Mu shook his head and sighed. This is too much of a scumbag. Although doing this didn't harm people or seek wealth, who knew how many innocent girls' feelings it would play with? Li Mu's conscience didn't allow him to do this. But if he didn't do this, there would only be one way to obtain love and lust. Could this be a hint from the heavens to him, a hint for him to marry a few more wives? Li Mu sat in the duty room thinking about this problem. 2 bald heads appeared at the door of the duty room. The little bald head was Huiyuan, and the big bald head was Xuandu. Li Mu remembered that he had promised Xuandu to treat the abbot of the Jinshan temple. He stood up and said, Master Xuandu can just send a little monk to inform me. There's no need to come in person? Xuandu smiled and asked, Young benefactor, do you have time to go to the Jinshan temple now? Li Mu nodded and said, I'll go and inform the boss. Li Mu went to the duty room to inform Li Qing that he was going to the Jinshan temple. He found that she was not in the yamen, so he had to inform Constable Zhou and ask Huiyuan to accompany him up the mountain. Huiyuan called Xuandu Shirshu, but he was not a monk of the Jinshan temple. There were 6 Taoist sects and 4 Buddhist sections. To be precise, whether it was the 6 Taoist sects or the 4 Buddhist sects, they were not a sect but a faction. Fulu school was good at Fulu. In addition to the ancestral court, there were countless Taoist temples, all of which were branches of Fulu school. The difference between the 4 Buddhist sects was that they cultivated different scriptures. The doctrines of each sect were not very different, but the scriptures they believed in were different. Their cultivation habits were also very different. The Mind sect believed that everything was like a dream or an illusion. Everything was empty. Cultivators needed to forget their desires and surpass themselves. The Nirvana sect believed in nirvana, which talked about life and death, and understanding one's nature. The Suffering sect and the Yen sect, one advocated asceticism and was strict with oneself. The other was detached from the world and did not teach others. Their influence was far less than the first 2 sections. The ancestral court of the Heart sect belonged to the Heart sect. The Jinshan temple also belonged to the Heart sect. They cultivated the same scriptures. Everyone who worshipped this scripture as a classic was a branch of the Heart sect. The Jinshan temple and the ancestral court of the Heart sect were of the same origin. Huiyuan and Xuandu were naturally closer. This was Li Mu's second time coming to the Jinshan temple. However, the last time he came was at night. This time it was daytime. The Jinshan temple was very famous in the area. This fame was mainly due to Xuandu. Wherever there were demons and ghosts that harmed people, he would be there. After his physical conversion, there were now more demons and ghosts in the Jinshan temple than people. Since they had entered the temple, they naturally had to enter the hall to pay their respects. Li Mu followed behind Xuandu and met many pilgrims along the way. There were many men and women who were sincerely chanting scriptures on the prayer mats in the hall. Only a few of the prayer mats were empty. Li Mu stood in the hall and looked at the chanting crowd. He felt a sense of familiarity. When he thought of where this sense of familiarity came from, he closed his eyes and silently felt it. He found that a trace of merit power was spreading out from these pilgrims and entering the body of the Buddha statue. Huiyuan said that by doing charity, repairing temples, creating statues, freeing people, and saving people from suffering, one could obtain merit. According to Li Mu's previous understanding, merit was doing good deeds. Now, it seemed that merit was a kind of power that originated from the human heart. These Buddha statues just stood there quietly, and the people would contribute the power of merit. Walking out of the hall, Xuandu chanted the name of Buddha and asked, "Benefactor Li, are you curious about merit?" Li Mu nodded and said, "This power is quite magical. I don't know what's so mysterious about it." Xuandu smiled and said, "This power is called merit by Buddhism and psyche power by Haoyan Taoism. The imperial court regards it as national luck. It can help cultivators cultivate and also help the country gather national luck. It is the power of faith and the power of people." Li Mu understood the general idea. Whether it was Haoyan Taoism, Buddhism, or a country, if they wanted to continue to grow, it was inevitable that they had to unite the hearts of people. Those who won the hearts of the people would win the world. If a temple had no pilgrims, it would naturally decline. A country without the hearts of the people would not be far from collapse. Li Mu pondered the meaning of Xuandu's words. He followed him through several corridors and came to a wing room. A young novice monk said, "Uncle Xuandu, the abbot just took a rest." Xuandu looked at Li Mu and said apologetically, "I may have to trouble Benefactor Li to wait for a while. It's okay." Li Mu waved his hand to show that he did not mind. He asked again, "What level has the abbot reached?" Xuandu said, "Uncle Abbot reached the Golden Body Dharma Laksana more than 10 years ago." Dharma Laksana. Li Mu was shocked. 4th grade Golden Body Dharma Laksana and 5th grade Dharma Laksana. In the Dharma Laksana realm, one's physical body had been cultivated to an extremely powerful level. He could fight against cultivators in the creation realm. This was something that Li Mu did not even dare to think about. What kind of person could injure such a high Buddhist monk? Xuandu said, "The one who injured Uncle Abbot was a heretical cultivation in the Dongxian realm. However, the heretical cultivation was also surrounded and killed by orthodox cultivators. His soul was scattered. The person with the highest level of cultivation that Li Mu had ever seen was Xuandu. Dongxian was already at the peak of the middle three realms. His Taoist skills were mysterious. One more step and he would be in the upper three realms. He was a true immortal. The heretical cultivation in the Dongxian realm, who knew how many people he had killed on his path of cultivation. It was terrifying just thinking about it. The two of them did not talk for long before a young monk came over and said, "Uncle Xuandu, the abbot is awake." Chapter 104. The last time he came to the Jinshan temple, Li Mu met the abbot once. The old monk had white hair and a white beard. He had a benevolent face, but his body was a little thin. He sat cross-legged on a futon in the meditation room. His body looked weak, but his eyes were bright, as if they could see through people's hearts. Xuandu stepped forward and introduced, "Martial uncle, this is young benefactor Li Mu." Li Mu put his hands together and said, "Greetings, Master Abbot. Young benefactor, you don't have to be so polite." The abbot smiled kindly and said, "My old bones will have to trouble you. I owe Master Xian due a debt of gratitude. This is what I should do." Li Mu said politely. Without further ado, he said, "Let's start now." On the futon, the abbot sat cross-legged with his back facing Li Mu. Li Mu stood in front of the bed, reached out his right hand and pressed it against the abbot's back. He closed his eyes and used the Heart Sutra to silence himself. A golden light gradually appeared in his hand. With Li Mu's chanting, the golden light continuously flowed into the abbot's body. After a while, as Li Mu's mana was exhausted, the golden light in his hand gradually dimmed. At this time, Xuandu reached out and placed his hand on Li Mu's shoulder. Li Mu felt a pure Buddhist mana surge into his body from his shoulder, rushing into his limbs and bones. This mana was calm and stable, allowing Li Mu to mobilize it. The dim golden light in Li Mu's hand suddenly became dazzling. The abbot of the Jinshan temple was wrapped in a ball of Buddhist light. After a quarter of an hour, Li Mu opened his eyes. The Buddhist light in his hand had completely dimmed. Under his full power, Xuandu's mana was also close to being exhausted. At this time, Li Mu smelled a strange smell. He looked down at the black stain on his skin and exclaimed, "What is this?" Xuandu smiled and said, "These are the impurities left behind after your body tempering. Every time you break through a new realm, you will expel these impurities, making your body even tougher." Li Mu knew that Xuandu was helping him on purpose. He cupped his fists and said, "Thank you, Master." Xuandu smiled and said to a young monk outside, "Take benefactor Li to bathe." His body was sticky and smelly. It was very uncomfortable. Li Mu bathed for more than an hour before he felt that the smell on his body was gone. Li Mu also took the opportunity to admire his own body. He discovered that his skin was whiter and more tender than before. Most importantly, Li Mu could feel the surging strength in his body. It was unprecedented, and it gave him the illusion that he could kill a cow with a single punch. This made Li Mu even more determined to cultivate Buddhist techniques. If he could train his body to the extreme, it could be big or small, soft or hard. When he encountered zombies or demons, Li Mu could also be like Xuandu and use his fists to hammer them to death. The official uniform he was wearing was dirty and could not be worn again. Xuandu asked the young monk to prepare a monk's robe for him. The size was just right. After Li Mu changed, he opened the door and found Xuandu standing outside. Xuandu's spirit was slightly lifted. He looked at Li Mu and said, "The Buddhist light from the sutra does have a miraculous healing effect. Uncle Abbot's injuries have recovered a little, but if you want to fully recover, I'm afraid you will need to treat him a few more times." Li Mu nodded and said, "Then I will do it a few more times. Sorry to trouble you, Benefactor Li." Xuandu said, "I asked the kitchen to prepare vegetarian food. Benefactor Li, go and have some food first. Li Mu shook his head and said, No, I have something to do at home. I will go back first. Li Mu had eaten the vegetarian food of the Jinshan temple. It was plain soup and the taste was average. Today it was Lu Hanyan's turn to cook. Li Mu had been craving for her since the morning. Seeing Li Mu's thoughts, Xuandu nodded and did not force him. He said, In that case, I will send you down the mountain. Li Mu waved his hand and said, No, I will go back to the yamen with Huiyuan. Before leaving, Li Mu thought of something and said to Xuandu, By the way, I have a presumptuous request. Xuandu said, Benefactor Li, feel free to say it. After feeling the increase in his physical strength, Li Mu wanted more. He asked Xuandu about the cultivation method of breaking through to the next realm. The first realm of Taoism usually cultivated the 7 souls. Every time one cultivated a soul, one's spiritual power would increase greatly. The first realm of Buddhism cultivated the 6 senses: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Every time one cultivated a sense, the physical strength would increase greatly. When one cultivated to the golden body realm, the physical strength was comparable to a 4th realm demon cultivator. When one cultivated to the transcendence realm, the physical body could expand or shrink to a certain extent. It was even more powerful. After Li Mu asked, Xuandu did not refuse. He generously told him the cultivation method of the first realm of Buddhism. After cultivating the 6 senses, one's vision, hearing, smell, and taste would all increase greatly. Li Mu was looking forward to it. When he returned to the yamen, Li Qing was still not back. Hanja, who was about to leave, saw Li Mu and was stunned. He said with joy, Li Mu, you have finally become a monk. Li Mu looked down at his monk's robes and shook his head. He heartlessly cut off Hanja's hope. What a pity. Hanja looked at him with pity and said, You look quite good in this robe. He stood at the yamen door and looked at Li Mu. Suspicion gradually appeared on his face. He did not know if it was his illusion, but he felt that the Li Mu today was different from before. He seemed to have become more handsome. Li Mu looked at him indifferently. Why are you looking at me? Nothing. Hanja felt that he must be crazy to think that Li Mu was handsome. He waved his hand impatiently and turned to leave. During the days when Old Wang was not around, Li Mu realized that Old Wang was the mainstay of the yamen. As the secretary, he had to deal with all the big and small matters in the yamen. Every day he was busy from morning to night, from inside to outside. Li Mu was busy in the yamen for a while before he took the dirty robe home. Lu Hanyan was standing in the yard. When Li Mu approached, she suddenly pinched her nose and frowned. What's so smelly? Did you fall into a cesspool? What are you dressed up for? Li Mu waved the dirty robe in his hand and said, This official robe is dirty, so I changed it temporarily. Lu Hanyan pinched her nose and took the robe from his hand. She threw it into the basin and washed it with water several times. Then she squatted there and helped Li Mu wash it. Li Mu was a little embarrassed and said, Leave it there. I'll wash it myself later. I'm afraid you won't be able to wash it clean. Lu Hanyan muttered and said, I really don't know how you made the robe so smelly. As Lu Hanyan squatted there to wash the robe, Li Mu could not stay idle. He took out the vegetables from the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and squatted beside her to wash the vegetables that were to be eaten today. She scrubbed the robe vigorously and said, The bookstore found a few old books today. I put them in your study. Li Mu put the washed vegetables aside and said, I'll look at them when I have time. The Yunyan Pavilion bookstore was now the most popular bookstore in Yangshuo County. In addition to selling books, they also collected old books to see if there was a possibility of republishing. Usually, when they came across interesting books or unorthodox Taoist books, Lu Hanyan would help Li Mu bring them back. Lu Hanyan was washing when she suddenly stopped and stared straight at Li Mu's arm. Li Mu looked at her strangely and asked, What's wrong with you? Lu Hanyan put down the robe and grabbed Li Mu's arm with her wet hands. She turned it over and over several times and said, Why do I feel like you've become fairer? Your skin has also become better. It's so shiny and so smooth. She suddenly looked at Li Mu and asked, "Don't tell me you've been cultivating some kind of youth-preserving method behind our backs." In principle, as long as Li Mu cultivated according to the method Xuandu gave him and constantly expelled the impurities in his body, his skin would become better and better. Buddhism focused on tempering the body. Including Huiyuan, all the monks in the Jinshan temple had delicate skin and tender flesh. Looking at Lu Hanyan's questioning eyes, Li Mu shook his head and said, "Of course not." Li Mu did not intend to let her cultivate both Buddhism and Taoism. She drew spiritual qi into her body every day and had Fulu, which had the effect of retaining her youthful appearance. There was no need to add flowers to the brocade. More importantly, Li Mu really could not imagine what Lu Hanyan looked like when her whole body was shining with golden light and she hit people with a guzheng or a pipa. Chapter 105. You were like this before? Yu Hanyan still didn't believe it, but she wasn't sure. Because she had only seen Li Mu's body before, but she had never touched it. Her hand stroked Li Mu's arm back and forth. It was indescribably strange. Li Mu slapped her hand away and said, "I was like this before. You just didn't realize it." Yu Hanyan carefully studied him. She felt that his skin was much fairer and more tender than before. As she looked, she felt that Li Mu was quite handsome. Her face couldn't help but redden. She spat out, "I didn't realize it before, but you look really like a dog." Li Mu didn't want to be humiliated. He smiled and said, "Same to you." In terms of appearance, Li Mu could compete with Yu Hanyan. When the two of them stood together, they could be considered a golden couple. Yu Hanyan scolding Li Mu was the same as scolding herself. After eating, Li Mu began to practice the method of cultivating the six senses that Xuandu taught him. In the process of cultivation, refining the soul and cultivating the senses weren't necessary. Simply guiding the qi or chanting scriptures could increase one's mana without affecting one's breakthrough. Whether it was refining the seven souls or cultivating the six senses, it was all to develop the body to the maximum. For cultivators of the same level, those who had refined the corpse dog would have far sharper senses than those who hadn't. And those who had cultivated the six senses, their five senses and senses would also be far better than those who hadn't. The first sense that Li Mu cultivated was the vision sense. After this sense was cultivated, his eyes could clearly see things several miles away. It was a bit like the clairvoyant eye and the clairvoyant ear. As his cultivation increased, the range of this ability could see and hear would also increase. Xuandu was able to see that Li Mu didn't have the seven souls with a single glance. It was probably because of this. After cultivating for 2 hours, Li Mu took a few more arrows and practiced throwing them into the pot in the courtyard. Although the confrontation technique was powerful, Li Mu's mana was too low. He couldn't fully control it and couldn't accurately hit his target. He had wasted many opportunities in the karst cave. After returning from Zhou County, Li Mu planned to strengthen his ability in this area. He started to practice the basics of throwing pots. After he was familiar with it, he moved on to archery or darts. Before his magic power grew to the point where he could fully control this lightning technique, he could only use this method to increase his strength. After returning from Zhou County, Li Mu had taken over Lao Wang's position. Every day he was so busy that he didn't have time to go to Clearwater Bay. These 2 days he had some free time. On the morning of the second day, Li Mu went to Clearwater Bay. In the small house by the water, Suhi lightly glanced at Li Mu and said, "Once that little snake left, you really didn't come." Li Mu helplessly said, "Don't mess around. This time, something big really happened. I went to Zhou County a while ago. After returning, there were a bunch of things in the yamen. I just had some free time, so I came to see you." He didn't blame him anymore. While eating, she asked, "Have the zombies in Zhou County been dealt with?" "Can be considered to have been dealt with." Li Mu helped her rinse a few slices of beef and said, "A flying stiff escaped, but the experts from the Fugu school went after it. Dealing with it should be only a matter of time." When the flying stiff was mentioned, Li Mu couldn't help but think of the corpse in the lake. Obviously, that was also a flying stiff. It had been nourished by spiritual aura underwater for 20 years, so its cultivation was definitely not low. Moreover, other zombies were born from the accumulation of the resentment and filth of heaven and earth. They belonged to the category of een and evil creatures. She, however, grew up soaking in spiritual aura. There was no corpse aura on her body. Who knew if she would mutate or become more difficult to deal with? He said with some concern. I've asked around. The altar at the bottom of the lake is an exquisite formation. It's almost impossible to break it from the outside. We can only wait until she's strong enough to come out from inside. But at that time, I'm worried that you'll be in danger. The female corpse at the bottom of the lake was of the same origin as her. They had the same physical body and the same soul. Based on the habits of the flying stiff, the first thing she would do when she came out would be to devour Su-He. Su-He didn't care and said, then let her try. I'm not someone to be trifled with either. Li Mu suddenly had an idea and asked, if we destroy her soul and you take over her body, will she come back to life? No, she won't. Su-He shook her head and said, a soul body is not a primordial spirit. I can't live in another body. A soul is a soul, and a corpse is a corpse. Even if they become one, they're still evil creatures. After experiencing so many things, Li Mu's mind had long blurred the boundaries of life. If all things with self-consciousness were counted as living beings, then no matter if it was a human, a ghost, or a zombie with consciousness, they were all living beings. The only difference was that they existed in different forms. However, no matter what, he couldn't watch Su-He being devoured by that corpse. He took out a few talisman and a few strands of hair from his head and said, if that female corpse shows signs of breaking out of the formation, use this talisman. I'll come as soon as I see it. This was an immortal guiding talisman that Li Mu got from Li Qing. This talisman also had the function of sending messages. After it was tainted with the aura of Li Mu's hair, it could find Li Mu himself. When he saw this talisman, he knew that Su-He was in trouble. Li Mu was certainly no match for that female corpse, but he had full confidence in the two of them after they merged. Even if he was facing an opponent in the creation realm, he had the confidence to compete. After coming out of the Gulf of Clearwater, Li Mu used the teleport talisman to quickly return to the county and then strolled leisurely to the county government. The county government had very few restrictions on cultivators. Li Qing and Hanja were not a problem for them to be late and leave early. Since Li Mu stepped into the cultivation realm, Constable Zhou obviously didn't care much about him. Moreover, from the looks of it, Constable Zhou seemed to have the intention of promoting him to constable. However, Li Mu had tactfully rejected his hints several times. After all, if he was at the same level as Li Qing, there would be no reason for him to follow her in the future. When Li Mu arrived at the county government, he was about to enter when he saw a bald man pacing back and forth in front of the county government. The sun shone on his head, making it shiny. Seeing him pacing back and forth in front of the county government, Li Mu walked over and asked politely, Master, is there anything I can help you with? Master? The bald man turned his head and looked at Li Mu angrily. He asked, which eye of yours saw that I looked like a monk? Li Mu pointed to his head. The middle-aged man touched his bald head and his chest heaved a few times. He said angrily, I'm bald. I'm bald. I'm not a bald donkey. Li Mu looked carefully and found that there was still some hair under his head. However, the top of his head was brighter than Xuandu's and Huiyuan's. It was not strange that Li Mu recognized him at first glance. He muttered to himself, if you're bald like this, you might as well be a monk. The bald man looked at him suspiciously. What are you muttering about? Are you laughing at me? Li Mu's expression turned serious. No, he said. The bald man gave him a strong feeling. He was at least a master of the transcendent state. Li Mu could not afford to offend him. He looked at the bald man seriously and asked, what business do you have with the county government? The bald man said, I'm looking for Li Qing. Li Mu was stunned and asked tentatively, may I ask who you are? The bald man said with a sullen expression, I'm from the ancestral court of Fui School. Go in and find Li Qing. Tell her that Master Ma is looking for her. So it was someone from the Fugu school. Li Mu smiled and said, So it's Master Ma. Please come in. The boss should be inside. I'll take you in. Li Mu brought the monk to the duty room. He did not see Li Qing. She must have gone on patrol. Li Mu said to the bald man, Master Ma, please rest here for a while. The boss should be back soon. The bald man waved his hand and said, Forget it. She's not here. It's the same if I look for your county magistrate. Li Mu suddenly realized that this bald man was from the ancestral court of Fui School and was obviously Li Qing's follower. Could it be that he was here to denounce Wu Bo for his death? Zhang County magistrates had specially told Li Mu that if someone from the Fugu school came, he should say that he was not here. Li Mu smiled and said, Sorry, the county magistrate is not in the county government now. Not here? Master Ma frowned and asked, When will he come back? Li Mu shook his head and said, I don't know. Zhang Shan came out of the front hall. When he saw Li Mu, he waved his hand and said, Li Mu, where have you been? The county magistrate has been looking for you all morning. There are several files waiting for you to sort out. He saw Master Ma beside Li Mu. He was stunned and asked, Where did this monk come from? Chapter 106. Uncle Ma pointed at Zhang Shan and shouted, You are the monk. Your whole family are monks. What are you talking about? Zhang Shan glared at him and said, Can't you see that I have hair? Uncle Ma rolled up his sleeves and said angrily, Who are you talking about? Zhang Shan was not weak at all. He glared at him and said, What? This is the county office. Do you want to fight? Uncle Ma, why are you here? A cold voice sounded at the entrance of the office. After a while, Uncle Ma's chest heaved up and down. He looked at Zhang Shan, who was hiding at the door, and said to Li Qing with dissatisfaction, You should discipline your subordinates. They are too unruly. Li Qing poured a cup of tea for him and asked, Uncle Ma, why did you come to the county office? Uncle Ma drank the tea and said, Wu Bo is dead. Our fifth branch has suffered a great loss. Although we don't blame the county office, he died in the line of duty. The county office has to give us an explanation. Martial Uncle Ma spoke with a strong sense of righteousness, but Li Mu did not see how sad or angry he was. He drank a few cups of tea and suddenly said, I have to talk to your county magistrate about this matter. Take me to him. Zhang County magistrates did not want to see people from Fulu School, but Zhang Shan had unintentionally betrayed him, so he could not hide anymore. When Zhang Shan came out, there was a big footprint on his butt. He said to Uncle Ma with an unlucky face, The county magistrate wants to see you? In the front hall of the county office, Zhang County magistrates came out with a smile and said, Honorable guests, please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. Although Fulu School was powerful in the North County, the entire North County was part of the Great Zhou. Uncle Ma didn't hold back. He smiled and said, County magistrate, you're too polite. Zhang County magistrates said, The zombie disaster in Zhou County almost spread to our county. It was all thanks to the experts from Fulu School. Uncle Ma said, That's what we should do. As cultivators, we should protect the common people. Zhang County magistrates stood up and poured tea for him, saying, Since you've come from afar, why don't you try some of our county's best tea? Uncle Ma had already drunk a few cups of tea, but he couldn't refuse Zhang County magistrates' enthusiasm. After drinking a few cups of tea, his stomach was a little bloated. He wanted to mention Wu Bo's matter, but he was repeatedly interrupted by Zhang County magistrates. Zhang County magistrates talked about random things and changed the topic so he couldn't get to the point. After drinking another cup of tea, Uncle Ma finally couldn't help but say, To be honest, County Magistrate, I'm here because of Martial Nephew Wu's death. Zhang County magistrates said with a sorrowful expression, I'm also very sorry about Constable Wu's death. This is not only a loss to Fulu School, but also a loss to the Yangqiu County government. These days, every time I think about this, I feel bitter and hateful. I wish I could grind that zombie's bones to dust. Uncle Ma looked at Zhang County magistrates in a daze. If someone didn't know the truth and saw him like this, they probably wouldn't think that Wu Bo was a disciple of Fulu School, but a close friend of Zhang County magistrates. This made him somewhat unable to bring himself to say the words of reprimand. However, his main purpose for coming here wasn't to blame anyone. He patted Zhang County magistrates on the shoulder and comforted him. Things are unpredictable. County magistrate, you don't have to be too sad. My condolences, my condolences. Zhang County magistrate's eyes were filled with tears. My heart aches. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have let him go to Zhou County. Uncle Ma hurriedly said, This isn't county magistrate's fault. County magistrate, you don't have to blame yourself. Zhang County magistrates wiped away his tears and said, Let's not talk about these sad things. Come, fellow Taoist Ma, have some tea. I can't drink anymore, I can't drink anymore. Uncle Ma waved his hands and said, Addicts Zhang. I came to Yangqiu County this time because I have a favor to ask of you. After being stirred up by Zhang County magistrates, he had completely forgotten about Wu Bo's matter. Zhang County magistrates smiled and asked, May I know what fellow Taoist Ma wants? Uncle Ma sighed and said, Addicts Zhang knows about Wu Bo's potential. Our branch treated him as an important seedling and nurtured him. Now that he's fallen, it's a great loss for us. I came down the mountain this time because I want to ask Addicts Zhang to help me find a few good seedlings. Please forgive me for being unable to help you with this matter. Zhang County Magistrate's expression turned serious when he heard this. He sat up straight and said, Fellow Taoist Ma, don't tell me you don't know that this is strictly forbidden by the imperial court? Of course, Uncle Ma knew this. The reason why the relationship between Fulu School and the Great Zhou Court was not close was because the imperial court had never opened the door for them in this matter. Of course, the imperial court also had its own considerations. Although the 8 characters of a person's birth were simple, in the eyes of cultivators, they were not just numbers. It was very simple to indirectly take a person's life through their birth characters. Moreover, if those with special constitutions were found out by the heretical cultivation, their lives would be in danger. Therefore, the Great Zhou Court strictly forbade people outside the government from contacting the household register. He calmly took out a letter from his chest and handed it to Zhang County magistrates. This is a letter from the county governor. Addicts Zhang can take a look first. Zhang County magistrates opened the letter. The first thing he looked at was the county governor's seal at the bottom of the letter. He placed his hand on it and closed his eyes to feel it. After confirming that there was no mistake, he read the contents of the letter. Uncle Ma smiled and said, It's not just Yangqiu County. This time, the county governor has made an exception for the 13 counties in the northern county. I think that our Fulu School and the county governor should be able to trust Addicts Zhang, right? Zhang County magistrates read the letter carefully. The contents of the letter were exactly the same as what Uncle Ma had said. Perhaps it was because the Fulu School had done a lot to quell the zombie disaster in Zhou County, but the county governor had specifically stated in the letter that he should make things easier for the people of Fulu School. He had no choice but to obey the county governor's orders. Zhang County magistrates thought for a moment and said, Although the Fulu School has done a great job in quelling the northern county, I can only check your household registration for 3 years. Within 3 years, if there are any newborns born in Yangqiu County with special constitutions, I can tell you. If it's beyond the 3-year limit, I won't check. Uncle Ma nodded and said, 3 years is enough. Zhang County magistrates added, Also, only the constables of the Yangqiu County government can check the household registration information. Constable Li and Constable Han can't participate. For cultivators, it was taboo to let others know or check other people's birth characters. Uncle Ma didn't have any objections. He smiled and said, We'll listen to Addicts Zhang's arrangements. Today, Li Mu only stayed at the yamen for 4 hours before he strolled back home. It wasn't that he was slacking off, but that Zhang County magistrates had given all the cultivators in the yamen a day off. Only Zhang Shan, Li Si, and a few other constables who hadn't cultivated were left. They went to the house and closed the doors and windows tightly. They acted mysteriously. No one knew what they were doing. Li Mu wasn't curious about this. He enjoyed this rare leisure time very much. He opened the door and walked into the yard. After a while, Lu Hanyan flew over from the other side of the yard wall. She asked in confusion, "Why did you come to the yamen so early today?" Li Mu took out the books in the study to dry. He said, "There aren't many things to do in the yamen today." Lu Hanyan said, "Wan Wan and I are going to wash clothes later. Do you have any dirty clothes? I'll help you wash them." Li Mu took out 2 dirty clothes and handed them to her. He said, "Thank you." He didn't stand on ceremony with Lu Hanyan. Usually, Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan would help him wash clothes. When they encountered heavy work like moving things, they would come to Li Mu. Lu Hanyan waved her hand. She took Li Mu's dirty clothes and flew back to her yard. Li Mu took out a chair and sat comfortably on it. As he basked in the sun, he took a book from the stone table to read. These days, Yangqiu County wasn't peaceful. It was only recently that it finally became peaceful. Li Mu basked in the sun. The sound of Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan washing clothes came from next door. Everything was so harmonious. After going through so many twists and turns, Li Mu couldn't help but feel a trace of the stability of the modern world and the peace of life. He looked at the book and found the contents very familiar. Li Mu flipped open the cover and found the 3 words, "Supernatural Records," written on it. Li Mu had already read this book in the yamen. He wanted to put it down, but his hand paused. He clearly remembered that there was a missing page in the middle of the record of the supernatural in the county office. At that time, Li Mujing was reading it with great interest, so this was still fresh in his memory. Yunyan Pavilion didn't know where this book came from. Although it was a bit old, it didn't lack pages. Li Mu flipped to the missing pages and started reading again. These pages talked about the yin-yang 5 elements body. It was closely related to Li Mu and Lu Hanyan. Lu Hanyan had obviously read this book and even made a mark on it. The place where she made the mark was a body of pure yin and pure yang. It was a natural body for dual cultivation. The author also expressed his point of view here. The general idea was that a body of pure yin and pure yang was 1 in a million. It was even rarer to have a suitable gender and age. If one met such a person, they might as well dual cultivate together. Otherwise, it would be a waste of God's gift. Lu Hanyan finished washing clothes. When she came over, she happened to see Li Mu reading that page. The two of them looked at each other and the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Li Mu coughed lightly and took the initiative to break the awkwardness. He said, "Dual cultivation depends on the feelings." Although Lu Hanyan didn't think about this, she was obviously despised. She snorted and said, "After so many years, have you found your feelings?" A single dog mocked another single dog. Li Mu asked back, "You haven't found it either." "I don't want to find it." "I don't want to find it either." Li Mu suddenly looked at Lu Hanyan and said, "You said that after a few years, if one of us is still unmarried and the other is still unmarried, then..." Lu Hanyan raised her eyebrows. "Then what?" Li Mu sighed. "Then we'll be too miserable." But then he denied this possibility and said, "Even Zhang Shan can get a wife. I shouldn't..." Li Mu sighed and continued reading. The next page was a missing page in the county government's book. Li Mu finally connected the content about the yin-yang and 5 elements bodies that he saw last time. Pure yin, pure yang, and the 5 elements. These 7 innate bodies naturally gather qi. 1 day of cultivation is equivalent to several days of cultivation for ordinary people. The souls of the 5 elements and yin and yang also have the power of creation. If Dongxian can gather all of them and refine them with the souls of thousands of living people, there will be a chance of transcendence. Transcendence was the name for the 7th realm of Taoism. This sentence meant that if Dongxian cultivators could gather the souls of the yin-yang and 5 elements and refine them with a large amount of soul power, there would be a glimmer of hope for them to advance to the transcendent realm. However, this method was too vicious. Not only did one have to gather the souls of the yin-yang and 5 elements, but they also had to kill a large number of innocent people to extract the power of their souls. This was the work of the heretical cultivation. No wonder this page was torn out in the county government's book. Taking a step back, although this method was heaven-defying, it was not easy. The heretical cultivation that killed one person would be wanted by the government. If they killed thousands of people, they would have long been eliminated by the righteous path. How could they advance to the next realm? Moreover, gathering the souls of the yin-yang and 5 elements was easier said than done. Until now, there were only a few people that he knew of who had such a body constitution. Li Mu himself had the pure yang body. Lu Hanyan had the pure yin body. Zhao Yong had the fire elemental body, but he was already dead. Ren Yuan had the wood elemental body, but because he became a heretical cultivation, his head fell to the ground. Wu Bo had the earth elemental body, and his corpse was personally burned by Li Mu. Li Mu was stunned for a moment. He suddenly realized that he knew a lot of people with special body constitutions. Besides him and Lu Hanyan, no one had a good ending. Strictly speaking, Li Mu himself had already died once. In the past few months, there were people with the pure yang, fire elemental, wood elemental, and earth elemental bodies by Li Mu's side. Due to various reasons, their bodies died and their souls scattered. The sun above his head was scorching. Li Mu suddenly felt a chilly wind blowing around him, causing him to shiver. Lu Hanyan looked at the layer of fine bumps on his arm. She looked up at the sun and asked doubtfully, "Are you cold?" Chapter 107. Lu Hanyan saw that Li Mu's expression was strange, so she walked over and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing." Li Mu read the description on the supernatural records again and shook his head in amusement. Zhao Yong died because he killed his fiancée in order to curry favor with the governor. According to the laws of Great Zhou, he should be beheaded. Ren Yuan died because he went astray in his cultivation and harmed people's lives, so he was also beheaded according to the law. These 2 people were both beheaded at the entrance of the market. With one slash, their souls were scattered. As for Wu Bo, he died at the hands of the flying stiff, and Li Mu personally burned his corpse. As for the death of Li Mu's predecessor, because he was reincarnated, the Yamen didn't investigate too deeply. The deaths of the 4 people were unrelated, and it was very difficult to link them to the heretical cultivation of Dongxian. He was too sensitive. He put the supernatural records aside and picked up another book to read. After a quarter of an hour, Li Mu put down the book in his hand and picked up the supernatural records again. He didn't read a single word of the book just now. He flipped to the page of the supernatural records and read it again. In the end, Li Mu took a deep breath and stood up from the chair. Even if he believed that this was just a coincidence, he still decided to go to the Yamen to take a look. Lu Hanyan saw him hurriedly walk out and chased after him. She asked loudly, "Didn't you already go to the Yamen? Where are you going? Are you coming back for dinner tonight?" Li Mu was already on the street when he remembered something important. He turned back and said to Lu Hanyan, "Come with me." Lu Hanyan was confused. "Where are we going?" Li Mu said, "To the county Yamen." Lu Hanyan frowned. "Why are we going to the county Yamen?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Don't ask so many questions. Come with me." Lu Hanyan didn't know why Li Mu wanted her to go to the Yamen. After hesitating for a moment, she nodded and said, "Then wait, I'll tell Wan Wan." The reason why Li Mu brought Lu Hanyan along was because he knew that Lu Hanyan had a pure yin body. Out of the 7 yin-yang 5 elements, 4 of them were already dead. If that was really the case, then her situation would be very dangerous. Better to be safe than sorry. Li Mu could only be at ease if she was by his side. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan walked into the county Yamen and saw Hanja, Li Qing, and Uncle Ma standing in the yard. When Hanja saw him, he was stunned for a moment and asked, "Why are you back?" Li Qing saw Lu Hanyan. After a short moment of astonishment, she smiled at her and nodded. Lu Hanyan also smiled back. Li Mu ignored Hanja and looked at Li Qing as a greeting. Then he took Lu Hanyan to Old Wang's duty room. Old Wang's duty room was half a study and half a file room. Lu Hanyan stood in the duty room and asked in confusion, "Why did you ask me to come to the county Yamen?" Li Mu took down a stack of files from the bookshelf and said, "Sit here for a while. We'll talk about other things later." If this series of events were related and someone was really collecting souls of the 5 elements of yin and yang for cultivation, then the body of the metal element and the body of the water element would definitely be indispensable. The body of the 5 elements was rare. In such a short period of time, the probability of 5 people with such rare constitutions all dying by coincidence was almost non-existent. Compared to this, the possibility of heretical cultivation collecting souls of the 5 elements of yin and yang for cultivation was greater. This stack of files contained the cases that had not been solved by the Yamen in Yangqiu County for the past 6 months. From these files, it was easy to find out who had died in the past 6 months due to bizarre reasons. Seeing Li Mu's serious expression, Lu Hanyan did not ask more and sat quietly by the side. Li Mu put the files in front of him and opened them one by one. According to the information of the deceased's horoscope, he deduced whether they had the body of yin and yang or the body of the 5 elements. Lu Hanyan sat beside him and looked at him curiously with her head tilted. In the courtyard, Hanja's gaze was fixed on Li Qing. In this short 15 minutes, Li Qing had glanced at the watchroom more than 10 times. Hanja's lips curled into a smile. He thought to himself, Li Mu, oh Li Mu, how stupid of him to bring another woman to the county yamen. Looking at Li Qing's expression, it's obvious that she cares a lot. Let's see how he explains it to Li Qing later. At the thought of this, Hanja could not help but gloat. The smile on his face became even brighter. As he smiled, he seemed to understand something. He looked at Li Qing and then at the watchroom. His mood suddenly dropped. At this moment, he did not know whether Li Mu hoped that Li Qing would care or not when he brought another woman to the county yamen. In the watchroom, Li Mu had already calculated that none of the people who died in accidents in Yangqiu County in the past 6 months had a special body constitution. This made him heave a sigh of relief. The stone in his heart was also lifted. Sure enough, he had thought too much. Lu Hanyan saw that Li Mu had been counting on his fingers. She asked, "What are you calculating?" Li Mu said, "According to their horoscope, I'm calculating their body constitution." Lu Hanyan remembered that Li Mu had asked her horoscope before he found out that she had a pure yin body. She immediately became interested and said, "How do I calculate? Teach me." Li Mu handed the book to her and said, "It's written here. Read it yourself." Lu Hanyan pursed her lips. She took the supernatural records and read it herself. After reading for a while, she began to try using the files that Li Mu had calculated just now. Li Mu had already checked them. None of them had a special body constitution. He took out a few files from the shelf at the side and handed them to Lu Hanyan. He said, "Try these." These files were all closed cases in the yamen. There were no suspicious points in them. Li Mu did not look at them again. The files on Zhao Yong and Ren Yuan were all in there. It should be able to give Lu Hanyan a sense of achievement from learning new knowledge. After handing these files to Lu Hanyan, Li Mu leaned back in the chair and let out a long sigh. Just now at home, he was really frightened by the description in the supernatural records. What Dongxian heretical cultivation, what transcendence, yin and yang, the 5 elements, and the souls of 10,000 people. Li Mu was scared witless and had goosebumps. The 5 elements body was not common. The reason why Li Mu encountered so many was because of his identity as a bailiff. Zhao Yong's death was his own fault. He could not blame anyone else. His life started because of the fire element body, and also ended because of the fire element body. Ren Yuan also willingly fell into the evil path. That was why he ended up with his soul scattered. The wood element body allowed him to embark on the path of cultivation. It also sent him to the market under the executioner's knife. And Wu Bo, he died in the hands of the flying stiff. His death was also not suspicious. The deaths of these people, no matter what, could not be linked together. He leaned back in the chair, thinking about how to explain to Li Qing in a while. Should he invite her home to eat hot pot or spicy hot pot? Lu Hanyan held the files, pinched her fingers, and calculated with interest. After a moment, she said happily, "I calculated, this Ren Yuan has the wood element body. This Zhao Yong has the fire element body. This Wu Bo has the earth element body. This Zhang Dafu has the metal element body. This Wang Xiaowei has the water element body? Lu Hanyan frowned, looked at Li Mu with a questioning gaze and said, I only calculated a few. How come the 5 elements are all complete? Is this book written randomly? Crash. Li Mu bounced up from the chair, but because the movement was too big, he and the chair flipped over to the ground. Chapter 108. The moment he fell to the ground, Li Mu got up from the ground and hurriedly asked, Where are the metal element body and the water element body? Lu Hanyan handed the 2 files to him and said, Here, take a look. Li Mu grabbed the files and looked at them. Zhang Dafu, who is Zhang Dafu? It sounds familiar. Landlord Zhang. A voice exploded in Li Mu's mind. The case of the Zhang family village instantly appeared in his mind. At that time, after Landlord Zhang's father died, he happened to be buried in a corpse breeding ground. Within a month, he turned into a zombie and bit Landlord Zhang to death. The villagers of the Zhang family village reported it to the county government. That zombie was later killed by Hanja. The case of the Zhang family village was closed and no one paid attention to it anymore. But how could Landlord Zhang have the metal element body? Li Mu looked at Landlord Zhang's 8 characters and calculated with his fingers. His face was a little pale. Lu Hanyan was right. Landlord Zhang did have the metal element body. Li Mu also remembered that the villagers of the Zhang family village once said that Landlord Zhang was chosen by a Taoist priest when he was young and studied Taoist magic in the Taoist temple for 2 years. This must be because he had the metal element body. If a person with a 5 elements body like this died mysteriously, the county government would definitely investigate the possibility that it was caused by a heretic practitioner or a demon ghost. However, Landlord Zhang was bitten to death by his father, who turned into a zombie. The habit of zombies was to bite their blood first. It was reasonable for him to bite Landlord Zhang to death, and it was also in line with the law of heaven. In this way, there was no doubt about Landlord Zhang's death. He was killed by his relatives who had turned into a zombie and lost their humanity. No one would be bored enough to calculate his 8 characters again. Someone was deliberately covering up the fact that Landlord Zhang possessed the metal element constitution. He was deliberately diverting the attention of Li Mu and the others. If Li Mu's guess was true, then the death of the older Landlord Zhang and his transformation into a zombie was not an accident. Someone had orchestrated all of this behind the scenes. He had created the appearance of Landlord Zhang being killed by his own father. His true goal, from start to finish, was Landlord Zhang's soul. And Wang Xiaowei? Li Mu looked at the second file. After some calculations, he found that Wang Xiaowei did indeed have a water element body. But her cause of death was illness. The reason why the Yamen did not investigate in detail was because after her death, her soul found Li Mu and Li Qing and asked them to help her hand her child to her brother. Wang Xiaowei was a member of the Zhangwang clan. She was the first Yin spirit that Li Mu had encountered since he came to this world. At this point, the 5 elements constitution was complete. In addition to Li Mu's soul, he already had 6 out of the 7 Yin-Yang 5 elements. He only lacked pure Yin. In a short period of time, so many people with special constitutions had died in Yangqiu County, but the Yamen did not discover anything. It seemed inconceivable, but if one thought about it carefully, everything made sense. Zhao Yong and Ren Yuan's deaths were requested by the Zhang County magistrates. The county magistrate had stamped his seal and dragged them to the market to be beheaded. Who would suspect that there was a problem? Landlord Zhang's death was caused by his zombified father. Similarly, no one would suspect anything. Wu Bo's death was even more obvious. He died in Zhou County by accident at the hands of the flying stiff that had just evolved. No one would suspect that his death was related to Zhao Yong, Ren Yuan, and Landlord Zhang. The Zhangwang clan's death was caused by illness. Li Mu and Li Qing had personally taken care of her funeral. Her own Yin spirit did not complain, so the Yamen naturally did not investigate. Li Mu felt a chill run down his spine. Although there were still a few mysteries in his heart that had not been solved, there was no doubt that these cases, although seemingly unrelated, were inextricably linked behind the scenes. Someone had used a few months or even longer to set up a huge trap in Yangshuo County. Without attracting anyone's attention, he had collected the souls of the yin-yang 5 elements and set up this trap, trapping all of them together. Even the yamen had become a tool for him to collect the souls. As for his ultimate goal, it was clearly stated in the supernatural records. He was a powerful cultivator in the 6th realm of Dongxian. He wanted to ascend to the transcendent state. In the past few months, all the cases that Li Mu had experienced, big and small, were all stirred up by a pair of invisible hands behind the scenes. What made him even more terrified was that if the death of the original body was part of this plan, then after Li Mu was reincarnated in another body, wouldn't the mastermind have been watching him all this time? As he thought of this, a chill ran up Li Mu's spine, making him feel a little dizzy. His body swayed, and he had to hold onto the table to steady himself. Lu Hanyan looked at him worriedly and said nervously, "Li Mu, are you okay? What happened? Don't scare me." If Li Mu told her what had happened, it would be a real shock. However, Lu Hanyan did not give up and said firmly, "No matter what happened, we'll bear it together." Li Mu sighed helplessly, opened the supernatural records, and pointed to the content on that page. Lu Hanyan was smart. After seeing the description of the yin-yang 5 elements body and thinking of what she had just calculated, her face suddenly turned pale. She grabbed Li Mu's sleeve and said nervously, This could be a coincidence. Didn't you say that you still want the pure yin and pure yang bodies? Ah, you lost your 7 souls too?" Li Mu sighed and said, "I'm afraid that he only lacks the pure yin body. Could it be a coincidence?" Lu Hanyan still couldn't believe it. She muttered, "The book said that other than the yin-yang 5 element souls, you also need a large number of souls from living people. How could thousands of people die? The government won't." As she spoke, her voice suddenly stopped. The two of them looked at each other, and their eyes were filled with shock. They blurted out, "Zhou County!" The number of people who died because of the zombie disaster in Zhou County was already in the thousands. If their souls were taken away, it would fulfill the last requirement of the method. Thinking of how those living corpses didn't have any courage, and how the flying stiff abandoned Li Mu and the others twice, it seemed to have decided on Wu Bo. One of the doubts in Li Mu's heart was solved. At that time, what the person behind the scenes wanted was probably the soul of Wu Bo, who had the earth elemental body. In this way, the only suspicious point about Wu Bo's death could be explained. Lu Hanyan's whole body was cold. She grabbed Li Mu's hand and said in a trembling voice, "Li Mu, I'm a little scared." Not to mention Lu Hanyan. Even Li Mu was very scared. However, he could only hold her hand tightly and comfort her. "It's okay. No one knows your birth characters. You'll be fine." Li Qing said that even if a cultivator didn't know their birth characters, they couldn't see through other people's constitutions at a glance. If these people with special constitutions could be found so easily, Lu School wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to ask the local government for help. This was also the biggest mystery in Li Mu's heart. Apart from Wu Bo, how did the person behind the scenes know that these people had special constitutions? Could it be that the strong people in Dongxian had the ability to predict other people's birth characters? The sound of 2 footsteps came from the door of the duty room. Li Qing and Hanja stood at the door and saw Li Mu and Lu Hanyan holding hands. Hanja was stunned for a moment. He immediately turned around and said, "Sorry to disturb you." Li Qing's gaze swept over the two of them. Her expression didn't change. She silently turned around and left. Hanja turned around and hummed a little tune. He asked Li Mu, "You really chose Lady Lu?" Li Mu wasn't in the mood to answer him. He slowly walked out of the duty room and looked up at the sky. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, but it couldn't give Li Mu any warmth. The other people in the county office didn't know what had happened. Zhang Shan and Li Si walked out of the duty room and chatted happily. Hanja looked at Li Mu and then looked at Lu Hanyan, who was still holding hands with him. His face lit up. Seeing Zhang Shan and Li Si come out, Uncle Ma walked up and asked anxiously, "How was it? Did you find anything?" Zhang Shan said, "We found a purine body, and it's a girl." "Where?" Elder Ma's face lit up with joy as he immediately asked. Pure yin and pure yang bodies were much more precious than 5 elements bodies. As long as he found a pure yin body, his mission would be complete. Zhang Shan shook his head. "What a pity." Elder Ma's heart thumped. He asked, "What's a pity?" Zhang Shan shook his head and said, 3 months ago, she died prematurely. Chapter 109. The innocent baby girl died a tragic death. The sinister fat man lost his life. Why did the widowed woman die of illness in her home? Who was the one who screamed in the middle of the night? The rich second generation had several lives on his back. Was it the distortion of human nature or the decay of morality? The young girl's soul was at Broken Water Bay. The murderer was actually her fiancé. What other unknown secrets were hidden behind the murder cases? A meticulously planned conspiracy, several bewildering unsolved cases, tangled and complicated, hard to distinguish between truth and falsehood, clues and clues, a maze to pursue the murderer. For the truth, please read tonight's Great Joe's Immortal Official at 12 o'clock. Let's be serious. Great Joe's Immortal Official will be published tomorrow morning. At around 12:10, I will release all the drafts that I have saved up before publishing. It should be around 15,000 words. If it's 3,000 words per page, then it will be 5 chapters. It might also be 2 chapters of 7,000 to 8,000 words. The total number of words will not change. I hope that when the time comes, everyone will brush up on the book review section. I'm just joking. After all, compared to the magazines that sell newspapers for 5,000 to 6,000 words per page, I only cost 2,000 or so per page. If I'm not short, who is short? It's short in name and in reality. However, although it's short, it's still all right. I can confidently say this with my hands on my hips. Of course, being short isn't a good thing. The main reason is that the reading experience isn't good. After publishing, I will do my best to write as much as possible. Even if I don't sell magazines, I still have to let the readers have a comfortable reading experience. Great Joe's Immortal Official is different from all my previous works in terms of story structure. There's a lot less pretentiousness, a lot less face slapping, and a lot less divinity. I spent some pen and ink sculpting the characters and began to try out techniques that I haven't used before. This requires a lot more thought to come up with the plot, a lot of foreshadowing, and all kinds of obvious hidden lines. Sometimes the seemingly meaningless dialogue between 2 people is full of hints towards the plot. These things, when I look back, I have a headache. But when I finished writing the first volume, no matter how the readers feel, I still feel a sense of accomplishment. As for how to write the book, I won't be long-winded with everyone. Everything that I've expressed can be seen in the book. I'd like to thank the editor of the Xianxia group for arranging resources for the Xianxia newbie book. I'd like to thank old and new readers for their support. I hope that readers who like this book can subscribe to Qidian website. This is important to every author, including me. August 1st, early morning. Chapter 110. Li Mu strode to Zhang Shan and asked, "What did you say?" Zhang Shan was startled and murmured, "A girl with a purine body in our county died prematurely." Li Mu's body swayed and he felt that the world was spinning. Lu Hanyan, who was beside him, hurriedly supported him. At this point, yin and yang and the 5 elements were complete. Li Mu's predecessor had a pure yang body. Landlord Zhang had a metal elemental body. Ren Yuan had a wood elemental body. Zhangwang clan had a water elemental body. Zhao Yong had a fire elemental body. Wu Bo had an earth elemental body. 3 months ago, the baby girl who died prematurely had a pure yin body. The 7 of them had different genders, ages, identities, and causes of death. On the surface, there was no connection between them, but they had secretly gathered yin and yang and the 5 elements. There was also the zombie disaster in Zhou County. Thousands of people died, and a large number of living souls had accumulated. If these souls were refined by the yin and yang 5 elements soul refining array, the cultivators in Dongxian would have a chance to transcend. Li Mu's mood at this moment was indescribable. He opened his mouth, but he couldn't even make a sound. Dongxian. These 2 words were like a 1,000-pound boulder, pressing down on his heart. Lu Hanyan held his hand tightly, raised her head, and looked at him with a pale face. Li Mu knew that any fear was useless. He took a deep breath and silently recited the mind-clearing incantation. He looked at Lu Hanyan and said, "You have a pure yin body. Don't worry, you can go home first." Lu Hanyan knew that she couldn't help much. She nodded and said, "You must be careful. I'll wait for you at home." She took one last look at Li Mu and turned to leave. In the yard of the county yamen, Zhang Shan and Li Si were chatting. Uncle Ma slapped his thigh and sighed. Hanja was waiting to see Li Mu make a scene. Li Mu went to the duty room and closed the door. Receiving a large amount of information in such a short period of time was not something he could handle alone. In this world, the only person he could trust the most was Li Qing. Li Qing was sitting at the table, quietly reading a book. She looked up at Li Mu and asked, "Lady Lu left? Let's go." Li Mu walked over, looked at her, and reminded her, "Boss, you're holding the book upside down." Li Qing calmly straightened the book and asked, "What's the matter?" Li Mu turned to the page of the supernatural records and said, "Boss, look here." Li Qing looked over and thought for a moment. She looked at Li Mu and asked, "You want to find a woman with a purine body to practice dual cultivation?" Without waiting for Li Mu to answer, she frowned and said, "This is not allowed by the imperial court. Even if Zhang Shan and the others find a woman with a purine body, they can't tell you. Besides, even if they can find one, your age may not be suitable." She was looking at the section about dual cultivation. Li Mu said helplessly, "Not this section. It's the following section, the following section." Li Qing looked down and saw that it was written in the book. The souls of the 5 elements and yin and yang have the power of creation. If Dongxian can gather all of them with the help of thousands of souls of living people and refine them for oneself, there is a chance of transcendence. You're worried that heretical cultivation will steal your soul? Li Qing looked at him and said, "Don't worry. Without knowing your birth characters, no one can know your constitution." Li Mu put the files of Zhao Yong and the others on the table in front of her and said, "Zhang Shan just found out that 3 months ago, a baby girl with a pure yin body died prematurely in Yangqiu County. There was also the zombie disaster in Zhou County and Wu Bo's death. These can't all be coincidences." Li Qing looked at the files one by one. Her expression gradually became serious and she said, "Yin yang and 5 elements, only the pure yang is missing." As her voice fell, she suddenly looked up at Li Mu. Li Mu smiled bitterly and said, "Not a single one is missing." Li Qing suddenly stood up, and then a trace of doubt appeared on her face. She said, "If heretical cultivation really needs the souls of yin yang and 5 elements, why are your 3 souls still here?" Li Mu looked at her, took a deep breath and said, "Now that things have come to this, there are some things that I can no longer hide from the boss." Li Qing's face was full of disbelief. "Could it be that you—" "That's right." Li Mu nodded and said, "I was already dead, but my 3 souls were saved by a senior master. That senior saw that I had a pure yang body and said that he and I were fated to be master and disciple. He taught me a lot of Tao techniques and divine skills. Then he floated away and said that we would meet again in the future if fate permitted. He also warned me not to reveal his identity." Li Qing breathed a sigh of relief. It was not that she did not suspect Li Mu. After he died once, his temperament suddenly changed. He went from being timid and afraid of trouble to being responsible and responsible. She had a whole new level of respect for him. He also knew all kinds of mysterious divine skills and Tao techniques. This change was more like he had been taken over by someone. However, a few months ago, they had already gone through many tests and had long ruled out this possibility. No matter how high a cultivator's Tao was, it was impossible to completely control another person's body in such a short period of time, let alone avoid the detection of magical instruments. Although Li Mu's explanation was bizarre, it was the only reason that could explain these changes in his body. At this moment, Li Mu's fake death and the Tao techniques and scriptures that he suddenly knew after he woke up all had a reasonable explanation. Some of the doubts that had always existed in Li Qing's heart were also resolved. Li Mu also quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Taking this opportunity to dispel the suspicions in Li Qing's heart was his real goal. After all, a person who came back from the dead suddenly knew so many Tao techniques and divine skills. Normal people would feel that there was something wrong. If they had not already verified Li Mu's identity, they were afraid that Li Mu would have been treated as a heretical cultivation. Until now, Li Mu still did not know what had happened to his body. However, there was no doubt that the changes in his body were of a much higher level than taking over someone else's body and being reborn. Li Qing's attention returned to the matter itself. She said very seriously, "This matter must be reported to the county magistrate immediately." Li Mu thought for a while and asked, "Boss, could it be that what is written in this book is false?" Li Qing shook her head and said, "Even if the contents of this book are false, someone is using this book to set up a trap. Cannot be false." She looked at Li Mu and said worriedly, "If that person needs a pure young soul, then he will definitely not let you go. He might even come back." Li Mu knew very well that the person behind this had already gotten everything he wanted. He sighed and said, "This matter is not something that we can decide. Let's report it to the county magistrate immediately." Yangqiu County was only a small county. Zhang County Magistrates was only at the third realm of spirit condensation cultivation. And those who were qualified to set up the Yin-Yang 5-element soul refining array were at least at the peak of Dongxian. The sixth realm, Dongxian, was one step away from truly stepping into the upper three realms. Not to mention Zhang County Magistrates, even the North County Magistrates were like ants in his eyes. In the front hall of the county office, Zhang County Magistrates was leisurely drinking tea. In the past few months, Yangqiu County had not been peaceful. Murder cases came one after another. Zombies, heretical cultivation, and even a core disciple of Fulu School had died. As the county magistrate, he was always on tenterhooks. Fortunately, in the past month, the county had been much more peaceful and did not cause any trouble for him. If he did not make any great contributions, he could not count on any political achievements this year. But fortunately, no major mistakes had happened. He was not at the bottom of the 13 counties in the North County. At least he was much better than Zhou County. There was a knock on the door. Zhang County Magistrates put down his teacup and said, "Come in." Two figures walked in from outside. Zhang County Magistrates looked up and asked, "Miss Qing, Li Mu, did Zhang Shan and Li Si find out about any special constitutions?" Li Mu shook his head. Zhang County Magistrates sat up straight and said warily, "Did another murder case happen in the county?" Li Mu continued to shake his head. Zhang County Magistrates breathed a sigh of relief. He picked up his teacup again and said, "It's good that it's not a murder case. What happened?" Li Mu looked at his nervous face and thought of Zhang County Magistrate's cowardice. He coughed softly and said, "Sir, why don't you sit down first?" "What are you talking about?" Zhang County Magistrates frowned and leaned back in his chair. He said, "Do you think I'm scared? Who am I? I've seen all kinds of situations. What happened? Tell me." Li Mu said, "We found some clues. It's very likely that a heretical cultivation cultivator at the peak of Dongxian gathered the souls of the Yin-Yang 5 elements body in our county. Then he drove zombies to kill people in Zhou County and collected souls. He wanted to refine them and transcend." Puff! Zhang County Magistrates spat out a mouthful of tea. The teacup fell into his arms and he slipped from his chair to the ground. His pants were wet, but he didn't bother to wipe them off. He hurriedly got up from the ground and asked, "What did you say? Say it again?" Li Mu placed a few case files on the table and said, "In the past 6 months, 7 people with pure Yin and pure Yang bloodlines, as well as the 5 elements constitution, have died for various reasons in Yangqiu County. Their deaths are all suspicious. We suspect that someone is manipulating them from behind." pure yin, pure yang, 5 elements body, all of them were gathered together. It didn't take a genius to know what this meant. Zhang County magistrates laughed and said, "Coincidence. It must be a coincidence." Li Qing said solemnly, "Sir, it's impossible for there to be so many coincidences. There must be someone behind all these coincidences." Zhang County magistrates pointed at the files and said, "Look, the Zhangwang clan members died of illness. This was done by the two of you. I personally supervised the execution of Zhao Yong and Ren Yuan. Landlord Zhang was bitten to death by his zombie father. As for Wu Bo, it's even more ridiculous. He was bitten to death by the flying stiff. What does it have to do with Dongxian heretical cultivation?" Li Mu had already sorted out the sequence of events. He explained, "Ren Yuan's case is strange. It seems that someone deliberately led him to cultivate and let him fall into the evil path. They used the yamen to obtain his soul. In this way, even if Ren Yuan had a wood element body, no one would suspect anything. In Zhou County, the deaths of Wu Bo and thousands of people in Zhou County were not coincidences." Zhang County magistrates still didn't believe it. He asked, "The executioner's knife destroyed his soul. How did the heretical cultivation obtain his soul?" Li Qing said, "For the cultivators in Dongxian, it's not difficult to extract their souls before the executioner executes them." Li Mu continued, "Ren Yuan and Landlord Zhang are the same. We ignored their special bodies for a legitimate reason. Among them, there must be something wrong with the feng shui master who helped the Landlord Zhang choose the tomb and Ren Yuan's master." Thinking of the black-robed man, Li Mu began to wonder if he had really killed the black-robed man that day when he had merged with Su He. Zhang County magistrates shook his head and asked, "What about the pure yang and the pure yin?" Li Mu said, "Zhang Shan and Li Si just found out that 3 months ago, a baby girl with a pure yin body died in Yangqiu County. It's very common for babies to die prematurely. Her family didn't report it, and the yamen didn't investigate." Zhang County magistrates asked again, "What about the pure yang?" Li Mu said, "I am the pure yang." Zhang County magistrates suddenly took 2 steps back and said in surprise, "Aren't you standing right here?" Li Mu looked at Zhang County magistrates and said, "A few months ago, there was an evil spirit that wanted to extract my soul. I was lucky enough to survive. Although my 3 souls returned to my body, I lost my 7 souls." Zhang County magistrates slumped in his chair, looking like there was nothing left to live for. In fact, he had believed it from the beginning, but he was unwilling to accept the truth. He had been targeted by a see-through realm evil cultivator for no reason, and had set up such a huge chess game in his territory. Everyone, including him, had been treated as chess pieces to be manipulated at the will of the evil cultivator. He covered his face and said sadly, "What sin have I committed? Damn it, if I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have been a county magistrate. Whoever wants to be a county magistrate can be a county magistrate. There are no good things, but all the bad things have happened to me." Li Mu looked at him helplessly and said, "Lord Zhang, now is not the time to regret. We should think about what to do next." Zhang County magistrates took a deep breath and removed his hands from his face. His expression became serious again, and his eyes became sharp. He spread out the files and said, "So far, there are still a few suspicious points in this case." Zhang County magistrates first pointed to Zhao Yong's file and said, "Zhao Yong was chosen by the county magistrate. For his future, he killed his fiancée, Lin Wan, and dumped her body at the Bay of Clear Water. Later, Lin Wan turned into a resentful spirit to seek revenge. When you were investigating the case, you learned of Lin Wan's injustice. After an in-depth investigation, you found out that Zhao Yong was killed at Kaishiku. This case can't be man-made." Li Mu nodded and said, "Zhao Yong's death indeed has no trace of other people's interference." Zhang County magistrates continued, "Let's assume that someone could take away their souls before the executioner killed them. But how did this person know that they had a special constitution?" Zhang County magistrates' questions went straight to the heart of the matter, which was also what Li Mu was puzzled about. He thought for a moment and said, In the Dongxian realm, one can observe the stars and do fortune-telling. Perhaps there is a way to deduce these things. Of course, there is another possibility. Zhang County magistrates asked, "Do you suspect that there is a mole in the Yamen?" The simplest and most direct way to find out the people's birth characters in Yangqiu County was to check their household registration. The possibility of a mole in the Yamen was not high, including Li Mu. All the bailiffs and Yamen runners in the Yamen had been in the county Yamen for more than 2 years. Moreover, they did not have the authority to enter the household to check the household registration. We can't rule out this possibility. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "But it is also possible that he broke into the household and checked a large number of household registration files. Separating his spirit from his body and hiding his tracks should be very easy for Dongxian cultivators. After concentrating his spirit, his vital spirit could leave his body." The county Yamen was surrounded by a formation. Ordinary spiritual bodies could not break in, but it definitely could not stop Dongxian cultivators. Zhang County magistrates thought for a moment and said, "That's right. Except for Old Wang, no one can see the people's household registration. Old Wang has been in the Yamen all his life. Even if there is a problem with anyone, there is no problem with him." Finally, he looked at Li Mu and said, "You said you have a pure yang body?" Li Mu nodded. Zhang County magistrates asked, "The soul of a pure yang body is the most important part of using this method. But your soul is still in your body. Doesn't this mean that the heretical cultivation failed to seize your soul?" Li Mu already had an excuse for this. He said, "When my soul was seized, a senior happened to save me. My soul was lucky to return to my body." "Senior?" Zhang County magistrates asked suspiciously. "Which senior? What's his name?" Li Mu said, "He said his name was Laozi. Not only did he save me, but he also taught me some Shentong Taoist magic arts." Zhang County magistrates frowned and said, "Laozi?" Li Mu corrected his pronunciation and said, "Laozi." Zhang County magistrates asked, "Can you prove it?" Li Mu looked at Li Qing and said, "Boss can prove it." Li Qing nodded and said, "We checked a few months ago. Li Mu was not seized by anyone, and he does know some Shentong Taoist magic arts." Zhang County magistrates looked away from Li Mu and no longer doubted him. Whether it was possession or possession, it was impossible to completely fit into another person's body in a short period of time. Even the cultivators of Dongxian couldn't do a perfect possession. Whether it was possession or not, it could be tested with a simple magic instrument. Zhang County magistrates touched the short beard on his chin and said, "So, he hasn't gotten the soul of the pure yang body, and it's very likely that he will come back to you?" Li Mu nodded and said, "But we can't rule out the possibility that he has already found another pure yang body." Zhang County magistrates breathed a sigh of relief and said, "This matter involves a lot of things. Don't tell anyone about it yet. Investigate it in secret. You can make a final decision after you've thoroughly investigated it." He looked at Li Mu and said, "Also, don't tell anyone about your pure yang body. Do you want to die?" Li Mu felt wronged and said, "I'm not doing this for the case." Zhang County magistrates waved his hand and said, "You too? Start investigating the case immediately. I'll give you 3 days. You must investigate all the clues." Zhang County magistrates still held on to a glimmer of hope. In fact, so did Li Mu. Whenever he thought about the fact that there was a master at the peak of Dongxian who had been secretly watching him for the past few months, he felt a chill in his heart and his hair stood on end. Li Qing looked at him and comforted him. "Don't worry. If there really is a Dongxian heretical cultivation, the Fulu school won't sit by and do nothing. They will definitely send all the peak chiefs down the mountain to eradicate it." Li Mu hadn't even refined the 7 spirits. Dongxian, this was a realm that he couldn't even dream of. Even if he and Suhi combined, they still wouldn't be a match for the master at the peak of Dongxian. However, no matter how anxious and fearful he was, he still had to face what he had to face. Li Mu composed himself and said, "Let's investigate these cases first." The two of them didn't waste any time. After leaving Zhang County Magistrate's place, they went straight out of the county yamen. Han just stood in the yard and watched the two of them leave. He scratched his head and muttered, "That's it." He thought that Li Mu bringing women back to the yamen would be a hurdle that he couldn't get over with Li Qing. He didn't expect that they would act as if nothing had happened. Han just suddenly realized that he didn't understand women at all. Or was it that Li Mu's methods were so brilliant that he couldn't figure them out? He thought about it and walked over to Li Si and asked, "Tell me, how can I be like Li Mu and be liked by women?" Li Si looked at him and said, "First of all, you have to be as good-looking as he is." Hanja frowned and said, "What if I'm not as good-looking as he is?" Li Si thought about it and said, "Or you have a lot of money." "What if I don't have money?" Haha. After leaving the county yamen, the first place that Li Mu and Li Qing went to was the Wang family village in the west of the city. After the death of the Zhangwang clan, her child was handed over to her brother to raise. Now that they thought about it, Li Mu and Li Qing had seen the dissipation of the soul of the Zhangwang clan with their own eyes. How could they suspect that there was something else behind her death? There was no doubt that the dissipation of the soul of the Zhangwang clan was not real. All of this was done for Li Mu and Li Qing to see. The mastermind behind the scenes was so careful and scheming that it made one's hair stand on end. Wang Dong, the brother of the Zhangwang clan, still remembered them. He walked into the yard with a baby in his arms and asked in confusion, "Why are the two of you here?" Li Qing was not good at talking to people. Li Mu took the initiative to walk forward and said, "The yamen has been reviewing the cases that happened this year. We would like to know some details about your sister's case." Speaking of the Zhangwang clan, Wang Dong looked sad and sighed. "My poor sister. Not long after she got married, her husband ran away to become a monk. When she was pregnant, her parents-in-law also left her. It was a pity that she had to take care of the family alone. Her body was exhausted. My damn brother-in-law, how could he be so cruel?" The experience of the Zhangwang clan was indeed pitiful, but this was not the focus of Li Mu and Li Qing. He looked at Wang Dong and asked, "Has she always been in poor health?" "Always." Wang Dong nodded and said, "At that time, I advised her to remarry and find another man to take care of her, but she refused. Alas, if I had known, I wouldn't have let her stay in the Zhang family alone." Walking out of the Zhang family village, Li Mu's expression was melancholy. At first glance, there was nothing suspicious about the death of the Zhangwang clan. A woman with a weak body, taking care of a child alone, fell ill from overwork and died at home. This was something that everyone knew. No one, including herself, doubted her own death. Even if the yamen found out that she had a water element body, they would probably think it was a coincidence. Only by connecting her death with these unrelated cases and combining it with the supernatural records could one smell the extraordinariness behind it. A dignified cultivator of Dongxian who could transform, know the time, and know the number of stars, who was one step away from entering the upper realm, who could walk unhindered in the 10 continents, was actually so cautious. It was simply unreasonable. Li Mu could not help but complain. He still had to continue the investigation. The girl with the pure Yin body was born in the Chan family village, not far from the Wang family village. She walked over in a daze and grabbed the old woman's arm. She cried, "Give me back my child! Give me back my child!" The old woman fell to the ground, unconscious, and lost consciousness. The light in Li Qing's eyes was no longer dim. Her face was as cold as frost. She said coldly, "Stupid woman!" Li Mu looked at Li Qing's hand holding the sword. He hurriedly grabbed her wrist and said, "Boss, calm down. We'll report this matter to the yamen when we get back. Lord Zhang will deal with it." Although Li Mu also wanted to strike this old woman with lightning, to punish her, they still had to follow the laws of Great Zhou. They did not have the right to use private punishment. Moreover, they had more important things to do. Li Mu looked at the dazed woman and said, "Don't worry, the yamen will definitely give you justice." When they walked out of the Chen family village, Li Mu gathered his emotions and sighed softly. He said, "The fortune teller, like the feng shui master who chose the location for the tomb of the older landlord Zhang, Ren Yuan's master, The fortune-teller who came to the Chun family village was also very suspicious. He did not need to do it himself. With a sentence of jinx, this girl with a pure body died early. He used a method that would not be suspected and easily obtained her soul. The person behind the scenes was not only extremely powerful but also cautious. He also played with people's hearts to the extreme. A cultivator at the peak of Dongxian, in order to not attract attention, quietly collected the souls of yin and yang and the 5 elements. He actually painstakingly set up such a trap. This was really cowardly. Chapter 111. The third place that Li Mu and Li Qing went to was Zhang family village. The villagers of Zhang family village still remembered the two of them. They asked Li Mu worriedly if zombies had run out to harm people again. Li Mu comforted the villagers and went to the minister's mansion. The older landlord Zhang and landlord Zhang had been turned into ashes. The person in charge of the minister's mansion was the son of the landlord Zhang, the younger landlord Zhang. In the minister's mansion, Li Mu asked the younger landlord Zhang, "How did your grandfather die?" The younger landlord Zhang said, "Grandfather was old. He died of old age." Li Mu continued to ask, "Was he healthy before?" The younger landlord Zhang shook his head and said, "Grandfather was old. Although he was not seriously ill, he was not healthy." The older landlord Zhang was over 70 years old. If he had not stepped on the path of cultivation, very few ordinary people would have lived to this age. Even if he died, it would be a happy funeral. The landlord Zhang would not ask someone to examine how his father died. The older landlord Zhang's body had long been turned into a zombie and was turned into ashes by Han Zhe. Li Mu wanted to investigate, but he had no way to do so. He asked again, "Your father, landlord Zhang, Zhang Dafu, used to cultivate Taoism?" The younger landlord Zhang nodded and said, "When my father was young, he cultivated with the Taoist of Bailu Temple for 2 years. In the end, he couldn't stand the loneliness of cultivation and couldn't let go of the family business. So he went down the mountain and went home. The Taoist said that it was a pity for my father's talent. He said that he was a gold something, a body of gold element." Yes, a body of gold element. Li Mu sighed and asked again, "Which feng shui master did you hire for the older landlord Zhang's tomb?" The root of landlord Zhang's case was that the feng shui master, the landlord Zhang's corpse, had not only been buried in the corpse-raising ground, but had also been refined. That was why he had turned into a jumping zombie in such a short time. Combined with the zombie disaster in Zhou County, it was not hard to imagine that the Dongxian heretical cultivation behind it must be good at refining corpses. The younger landlord Zhang shook his head and said, "No, it was the feng shui master who came and said that he would do it for us for free. When father heard that it was free, he agreed." "What does that feng shui master look like?" "White-haired and white-bearded, immortal-like." Li Mu didn't ask any more questions. Dongshuan's cultivators were already able to practice transformation techniques. They could change their bodies into men or women, big or small. It was impossible to get any useful information from them just by looking at their appearance. He said straightforwardly, "Take us to your grandfather's tomb." Li Qing recalled that matter and said, "But hasn't it been killed?" Li Mu sighed softly and said, "I'm afraid not." Last time at the Ren mansion, Li Mu had already asked shopkeeper Ran about the black-robed man. To be on the safe side, Li Mu went there again. The clues he got were the same as last time. Ren Yuan met the black-robed man when he went out to play. The black-robed man saw that Ren Yuan had a wood elemental body at a glance and accepted Ren Yuan as his disciple to guide him in his cultivation. Li Mu guessed that the black-robed man should have taken a fancy to Ren Yuan's soul. He wanted to wait until Ren Yuan's cultivation had reached a certain level before killing Ren Yuan and extracting his soul. Now it seemed that the black-robed man wanted Ren Yuan's soul, but the process was different from what Li Mu thought. He never thought of doing it himself. Instead, he trained Ren Yuan into a heretical cultivation and used the power of the government to obtain Ren Yuan's soul. In this way, Ren Yuan's death would be a normal event. No one would suspect that there was someone behind it. The only thing that Li Mu didn't understand was that the black-robed man didn't have to appear in Ren Yuan's case. He had already achieved his goal. Why did he still appear and risk exposing his identity to hunt down Li Mu? This was not in line with his usual cautiousness. There must be a deeper reason for this. The moment this thought flashed through Li Mu's mind, his body trembled slightly and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Li Mu had a lot of secrets, but his biggest secret was that he came from another world. This secret had always been buried deep in Li Mu's heart. Even Li Qing didn't know about it. The Li Mu of this world was already dead. Now there was a new soul in his body. Except for Li Mu himself, there was only one person in this world who knew this secret. That person was the murderer of Li Mu. Li Mu finally understood why the black-robed man didn't want to kill him. He was testing him. Given his cautious nature, he would definitely want to figure out what had happened when he saw that the pure young body, whose soul he had extracted, had come back to life. If Li Mu was the person behind the scenes, he probably wouldn't be at ease. Li Mu shuddered at the thought of a pair of eyes watching him all the time behind his back. A heretical cultivation of Dongxian, a top existence in this world, was so cautious and patient. He spent nearly half a year to set up such a trap. How terrifying was that? He really couldn't figure it out and couldn't help but ask, "Boss, why do you think he is so careful? Does a Dongxian expert need to be so careful?" Li Qing looked into the distance and said, "For us, the Dongxian realm is very powerful, but in the eyes of the experts of the upper realm, they are as weak as us. Whether it is the imperial court, Buddhism, or Taoism, they all have the existence of the upper realm. If you encounter them, even if you are a Dongxian heretical cultivation, you will die." She looked at Li Mu and continued, "I once told you that half a year ago, a Dongxian heretical cultivation was killed by the joint forces of Buddhism and Taoism." Li Mu thought of the old abbot of the Jinshan temple. Could it be that he was injured by the heretical cultivation? He took a deep breath. Now was not the time to think about this. Logically speaking, Li Mu discovered it too late. Whether it was the souls of the yin and yang 5 elements or a large number of ordinary people's souls, the heretical cultivation had already obtained them. With his cautious personality, he should have run to a place and secretly refined them to advance. He would never come back. In other words, what should have happened had already happened. Yangqiu County would no longer be in danger. However, the person behind the scenes knew more about Li Mu's resurrection than Li Mu. If he really succeeded in advancing and became an expert of the upper realm, he would probably come back to find him. Dongxian was already an existence that Li Mu couldn't even look up to. Transcendence of the 7th realm, this was something that made him despair just thinking about it. The Zhang County magistrates gave Li Mu and Li Qing 3 days to investigate, but the two only took 6 hours. Li Mu and Li Qing were both involved in the investigation of these cases. This reinvestigation was just to confirm some details that they didn't care about before. 7 cases, 7 dead people. On the surface, these 7 cases had no connection and had all been closed. Except for Li Mu, the other 6 people either died of illness or were beheaded according to the law because they were involved in other people's lives, or died in accidents that couldn't be found. If it weren't for the supernatural records, if it weren't for Li Mu who happened to discover that they all had special physiques, these closed cases would have been sealed in the yamen. No one would know that their deaths were related to each other. No one would know that the zombie riot in Zhou County that shook the entire North County was not a natural disaster, but a man-made one. The mastermind behind the scenes could have done all of this without anyone noticing. When the matter was done, he would leave and hide deep in the name. In the county yamen, the Zhang County magistrates sat in the hall. He couldn't help but pat the table and said angrily, "What kind of person could do such a crazy thing?" He thought for a moment and said, "This case is very important. I have to write a secret letter immediately and report it to the county governor." The Zhang County magistrate stood up and looked at Li Qing. He said, "Miss Qing, you also have to inform the Fulu school and ask them to send masters down the mountain to help. If these things are really controlled by the Dongxian heretical cultivation, I'm afraid that the North County government alone won't be able to quell it. Li Qing nodded and said, I'll go and tell Uncle Ma now. The Zhang County magistrates walked out of the door and walked in again. He said angrily, Don't forget, tomorrow morning, get someone to capture that old woman from the Chun family village and bring her to the yamen. That damned stupid woman. I'm so angry. Also, get all the fortune tellers and feng shui masters nearby to report to the county yamen within 3 days. In the future, if anyone dares to talk nonsense, I'll cut off their tongues. It was already late. Uncle Ma was still standing in the yard of the yamen, waiting for the results of the household. This time, he went down the mountain with the mission of recruiting disciples. Although the ancestral court of Fulu School was also a famous sect on the Zhou continent, it was not easy to nurture a Jushen disciple. This time, in Zhou County, they had lost 2, especially Elder Wu's grandson, which made their lineage suffer heavy losses. Therefore, they could only send people down the mountain and get an order from the county governor of the North County to recruit some talented disciples in the North County to make up for their losses. Unfortunately, it was not easy to find a purine body, but she died prematurely. If he had come a few months earlier, he would not have wasted such a good seedling. When he thought of the girl who died prematurely, his heart began to ache. Li Qing walked into the yard and said, Uncle Ma, there's a very important matter. What is it? Senior Uncle Ma touched his bald head. His spirits were lifted as he asked, Did you find another good seedling? Li Qing shook her head and said, This matter is very important. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to go back to the ancestral court. A moment later, Uncle Ma's body trembled and he said in a trembling voice, The peak of Dongxian? You must be joking. Li Qing said, We've already investigated. In the past few months, there have indeed been deaths of people with yin and yang bodies in Yangshuo County. There's something strange behind these cases, including the zombie disaster in Zhou County. The heretical cultivation must have deliberately created it to collect the souls of ordinary people. Oh no, oh no! Uncle Ma's expression changed drastically. He held the pillar and said, There's indeed something wrong with the flying stiff. Elder Wu just returned to the ancestral court and asked the chief to eliminate the flying stiff. If the heretical cultivation is the peak of Dongxian, won't they be in danger? No, no. He temporarily did not care about the recruitment of disciples and said, You stay here. I have to go back to the mountain immediately. Something big has happened. Something big has happened. As soon as his voice fell, he took out a palm-sized magic weapon from his arms. Uncle Ma threw the magic weapon into the air and cast a spell. The magic weapon immediately expanded and turned into the shape of a small boat. With a leap, he landed on the flying boat. Under the night sky, the flying boat turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the sky in the blink of an eye. Li Mu stood in the courtyard and watched Uncle Ma ride the flying boat and disappear into the night sky. He felt a little relieved. The ancestral court of Fulu School was one of the largest sects in the Zhou continent. They cultivated the righteous path and would not tolerate such heretical cultivation causing trouble under their nose. It would be best if the talisman puppet sect could dispatch an expert of the upper realm and kill the evil cultivator with a thunderous method. Then the evil cultivator would take Li Mu's secret and go to hell together. After Uncle Ma left, the Zhang County magistrates immediately sent out a secret letter asking for help. Li Mu left the yamen and walked home alone. For the past few months, there had been a pair of eyes spying on him from behind. Walking in the dark night, Li Mu should have been afraid, but his heart was incomparably calm. Not to mention the peak of Dongxian, even if it was an ordinary Dongxian cultivator or a creation realm cultivator, it would make no difference to him. If he really met them, he would not be able to escape. Thinking about it this way, it seemed that there was nothing to be afraid of. He just felt that the human heart was too scary. Li Mu had lived 2 lives and had never met such an existence. Clearly, his cultivation was already at the peak, but he was still overly cautious. He painstakingly set up such a trap and almost fooled everyone. Li Mu walked to the door, and the door next door opened. Lu Hanyan came out and asked worriedly, Are you okay? I'm fine. Li Mu looked at her and asked, "Why aren't you asleep yet?" Lu Hanyan glanced at him and said, "How can I sleep after such a big thing happened?" Wan Wan had already fallen asleep, and Lu Hanyan obviously did not eat. Li Mu also did not eat much all day. He went to the kitchen and cooked a bowl of noodles for each of them. Lu Hanyan picked up the chopsticks and asked, "Is the Dongxian realm very powerful?" She had read a lot of cultivation books and knew that the Dongxian realm was very powerful, but she did not know how powerful it was. Li Mu nodded and said, "Very powerful." Taoist cultivation consisted of refining the soul, condensing the soul, concentrating the spirit, Shentong, creation, and Dongxian. Dongxian was the last realm of the three middle realms. They could carry mountains and forbid water, transform themselves, and know the escape skills of the five elements. They could stop the flow of rivers. They knew the rules of heaven and could see the secrets of heaven with a pinch of their fingers. They were already immortals in the eyes of the world. The word powerful was not enough to describe them. Li Mu looked at Lu Hanyan and said, "But you don't have to worry. He has already obtained the soul of the pure Yin body. He won't come to you again." Lu Hanyan glared at him and said, "I'm worried about you. Your soul hasn't been hooked by him yet, has it?" Li Mu smiled and said, "Maybe he has already found another pure young body." Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were worried about the same thing. They both thought that the heretical cultivation had not yet obtained the soul of the pure yang body. But in fact, he was the first one to obtain the soul of the pure yang body. Landlord Zhang, Ren Yuan, and the others all died in their own ways. That person had spent a lot of effort. Only to Li Mu he was simple and crude. If the soul from another world had not occupied Li Mu's body and been reborn, he would have died in the line of duty. When the government office checked his birth characters, they might have found that he was a pure young body. Then, they would have increased the intensity of the investigation. Finally, they would have caught a monster or ghost that was used as a cover and closed the case hastily. According to the modus operandi of the heretical cultivation, Li Mu felt that it was very likely that he had planned to do so from the beginning. A person who was supposed to be dead came back to life. He was probably scared out of his wits. "You scared the hell out of me," Li Mu thought mischievously. The heretical cultivation at the peak of Dongxian could kill Li Mu with just a breath. Even if they gathered the strength of the entire North County, it would probably be difficult to eliminate them. He could only hope that the reinforcements from Lu School would be more powerful and not let that person come back to find him again. Lu Hanyan thought for a moment and said, "Why don't you run away? Leave Yangqiu County and North County. This way, the heretical cultivation won't be able to find you." Li Mu shook his head. If the heretical cultivation really targeted him, he would not be able to hide unless he ran to the ancestral court of Lu School or a place like the ancestral court of the Xian clan. Dongxian realm cultivators had a magical power called the moon fetching technique, also known as the mystic light technique. When this technique was used, a moon-shaped shadow would appear on the wall or in the void. Through this shadow, one could see the person or thing that the caster wanted to see. It was like an omnidirectional camera with no blind spots. No matter where Li Mu ran, he would not be able to avoid it. There will be a way. It was useless to think too much. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said, "You go and rest first. Maybe he won't come back." Li Mu did not believe that the heretical cultivation would not come back. He was just comforting Lu Hanyan. Early the next morning, Li Mu went to the yamen as usual. In order to avoid causing panic, the Zhang County magistrates did not make the matter public. The yamen was as usual. Old Wang looked at him and asked, "What are you thinking? Do you want to peek at young girls bathing?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't. I'm just asking. Do you know anything?" Of course, you can't see anything you want with the Shuangguang technique. Old Wang curled his lips and said, "The so-called Shuangguang technique is actually to project the appearance of a place to another place. First, it has to be close enough for the Shuangguang technique to be useful. Second, it has to be calculated. If you can't calculate the location of others, you can't see anything. Finally, the Shuangguang technique is useless for cultivators above the creation realm, because they can feel if someone is spying on them and can easily break their Shuangguang technique. Therefore, this is a useless divine ability, unless you use it to peek at the girl next door bathing. Li Mu didn't want to peek at Lu Hanyan bathing. He just wanted to know more about Dongxian. He thought for a moment and asked, "It's said that people in Dongxian can calculate all the mysteries of heaven with a pinch of their fingers. Is that true?" "It's true, but it's not that incredible." Old Wang clicked his tongue and said, "The mysteries of heaven are illusory. Who dares to say that they can calculate all the mysteries of heaven?" Old Wang's mouth didn't have any other skills, but it was good at relieving stress. Hearing him say this, Li Mu suddenly felt that Dongxian didn't seem so scary. He still wanted to know more, but Zhang Shan came in from outside and said, "Li Mu, there's a monk outside looking for you." Li Mu remembered that he had asked Xuandu to treat the old abbot's injuries. He could only suppress the other doubts in his heart and walk out of old Wang's room. Xuandu stood in the yard and bowed to Li Mu. "Benefactor Li, I'll have to trouble you again." Li Mu smiled and said, "It's no trouble at all. Let's go." The two had just walked out of the yamen when a few streams of light suddenly appeared in the distant sky. The streams of light arrived in an instant and landed at the entrance of the yamen, revealing a few figures. There were 3 people in the light. One of them was Uncle Ma, whom Li Mu had seen before. At this moment, he was standing respectfully behind the other 2. One of the other 2 was a middle-aged man wearing a Taoist robe and carrying a huge sword on his back. There were a few wrinkles at the corner of his eyes, indicating that he should be older than he looked. The other person was a beautiful woman who looked to be in her 30s. She held a horsetail whisk in her hand. The 2 stood there without any fluctuations of mana. In Li Mu's eyes, they were no different from ordinary people. Xuandu put his palms together and bowed to the middle-aged man. "I'm Xuandu. Greetings to Taoist Hyun Jinko." The middle-aged man asked, "Are you Xuandu from the Jinshan Temple?" Xuandu nodded. "That's me." The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, "How is Master Puji?" Perhaps even Li Si would look down on him. Li Mu did not intend to take shortcuts. Wouldn't it be better to earn money and marry a wife? If he was lucky, he could marry a woman with a higher cultivation than him, such as Li Qing. One would be enough. Compared to soul condensation cultivation, Li Mu was more concerned about the heretical cultivation. He did not know if 3 Dongxian cultivators would be able to kill him completely if they joined forces. Yuntai County. A middle-aged man was walking in the air above a dense mountain forest. After stepping into the forest, his footsteps paused for a moment. The next moment, his expression changed greatly. His body turned into a stream of light and quickly fled into the distance. At this moment, from the forest below, a dozen pillars of light suddenly rose into the sky. One could vaguely see Fulu's shadows in the pillars of light. The pillars of light were extremely thick. In the blink of an eye, they joined together to form a huge light shield that enveloped him. At the same time, 3 powerful auras appeared outside the light shield. 3 figures, 2 men and 1 woman, floated in the air. The beautiful woman held a horsetail whisk. The middle-aged man carried a huge sword on his back, and the last old man had an 8 trigrams mirror floating in front of him. After the 3 of them appeared, they continuously poured their spiritual power into the light shield, causing the light shield to become even more dazzling. Inside the light shield, the middle-aged man let out an angry roar. A thick corpse aura erupted from his body and instantly filled the light shield, faintly contending with the golden light. Hyun Jinko smiled and looked at the beautiful woman in Taoist robes. He said, "Miao Dun's divination technique has reached perfection. To be able to calculate the path he must take, Xuanzong's Tao is indeed marvelous." The beautiful middle-aged woman chuckled and said, "Your sex Fulu Tao has opened my eyes. to be able to use a talisman as a formation to trap this corpse. Otherwise, if he wanted to escape, we wouldn't have been able to stop him. This talisman formation is not inferior to the top formations of the Spirit Array sect. The last old man controlled the bronze mirror in front of him and poured his spiritual power into the pillar of light. He said, "Junior brother Xianjin, fellow Miao Dun, control the formation well. His injuries haven't completely healed yet. Take this opportunity to completely refine him. Even if a wisp of his soul escapes, it will lead to another catastrophe." Above the formation, powerful spiritual power fluctuations continued to spread. Within a radius of dozens of miles, whether it was uncivilized beasts or monsters that had awakened their consciousness, they all lay on the ground trembling. Even monsters that had taken human form couldn't calm the fear in their hearts. Chapter 113. In the county office, Zhang County magistrates looked at Li Mu with a flushed face and said, "Li Mu, you've made a great contribution this time. When the county governor finishes dealing with the matters in Zhou County, you should be rewarded." This time, such a big thing had happened in Yangqiu County. As the county magistrate, he couldn't absolve himself from the blame. Fortunately, Li Mu had seen through Master Qianhuan's plot in time, allowing the powerful people of Fulu School to track him down and kill him. This was also the credit of the Yangqiu County government. As the county magistrate, his merits offset his faults. Li Mu didn't care much about rewards. Master Qianhuan was Dongshuan's top heretical cultivation expert. The orthodox masters of Fulu School had killed him twice before killing him completely. Li Mu was very satisfied to be able to escape from him. After hearing the news, he couldn't wait to go home and tell Lu Hanyan. Lu Hanyan said in surprise, "Really?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Really? No matter how powerful he is, he can't fight 1 against 3. This time it's all thanks to your book. Otherwise, I'm afraid that no one would have known about the heretical cultivations plot." Li Mu still had lingering fears when he thought about this matter. If Li Mu hadn't seen the page of the supernatural records, he wouldn't have thought of the existence of the Yin-Yang 5 elements soul refining formation. Master Qianhuan had secretly collected the souls of the Yin-Yang 5 elements. Even if he couldn't break through, he would recover his original cultivation. At that time, it would probably be the time for him to look for Li Mu. Now, he had been refined by the 3 powerful people of Dongxian and his soul scattered. Li Mu didn't have to worry that the secret of his rebirth would be leaked. Lu Hanyan seemed to be happier than Li Mu about Master Qianhuan's death. She dragged Li Mu out to buy a table full of food and a jar of wine. When they came out of the market, they happened to meet Zhang Shan and Li Si, who were about to eat noodles at a noodle stall. Zhang Shan was stunned when he saw the two. He secretly winked at Li Mu and said, "Li Mu, Lady Lu, what a coincidence." Lu Hanyan was obviously in a good mood today. She smiled at the two and invited them. "Constables, would you like to eat at my house?" Zhang Shan looked at the chicken and fish in Li Mu's hands and then at the noodle stall not far away. His throat moved, and he said happily, "Sure." Li Si shook his head and said, "No trouble, we'll eat noodles." Zhang Shan frowned and said, "There's chicken and fish, what noodles?" Lu Hanyan smiled and said, "It's no trouble. You patrol so hard every day for the people of Yangqiu County. Besides, you're Li Mu's friends. Let's go." Li Si wanted to refuse, but Zhang Shan had already taken the chicken and fish from Li Mu's hands and said with a smile, "I'll take it. I'll take it." For a moment, he felt sad and lowered his head, concentrating on killing the fish. Li Si looked at Wan Wan, who was running around in the yard. Sometimes she ran to the kitchen to watch Li Qing cut vegetables, and sometimes she ran to watch Zhang Shan kill fish. He said, "I don't know what shopkeeper Lu is thinking, but that little maid really likes Li Mu very much. A little girl of this age is the easiest to deceive." Li Mu had never deceived Wan Wan. The little girl probably had a psychological shadow from being hungry when she was young. She liked whoever could feed her. Li Mu fed her every day. Wan Wan also knew how to return the favor. Every day, she helped Li Mu clean up the room and the yard. Massaging his back and shoulders was a common thing. Now, she had almost become the common maid of Li Mu and Lu Hanyan. At this time, Li Si looked in the direction of the kitchen again and said, "Boss, recently, the way he looks at you is a little—" Li Mu asked, "What's wrong with boss?" Seeing Li Qing come out of the kitchen, Li Si shook his head and said, "Nothing." Today's meal was mostly cooked by Lu Hanyan. When Zhongshan was eating, he praised Lu Hanyan's cooking skills. As he ate, he said, "I didn't expect Lady Lu's cooking skills to be so good. If my wife can cook half as well as you, my death will be worth it. If any man marries you in the future, his ancestors must have accumulated 8 generations of merit." Lu Hanyan smiled slightly and said modestly, "You're flattering me." Zhongshan picked up a mouthful of food and said, "It's true. Some girls nowadays don't know how to do needlework or how to cook, but they're good at wielding knives and swords. There aren't many girls like Lady Lu. She's beautiful, good at cooking, and rich." Cough. Li Mu coughed softly. "What, am I wrong?" Zhongshan glanced at Li Mu and said, "Girls should be like Lady Lu." "Hey, Li Si, why did you kick me?" Li Si gave him a look and said, "Be quiet when eating." Zhongshan followed Li Si's gaze and saw Li Qing. He seemed to think of something and his expression changed. He immediately said, "Boss, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you only know how to wield knives and swords, and I'm not saying that you're not as good as Lady Lu. It's okay." Li Qing looked indifferent and didn't care. She said, "Let's eat." With Zhongshan livening up the atmosphere, the meal was very lively. Lu Hanyan drank a little wine and her face was red. After the meal, she cleaned up the dishes with Li Mu and said with a smile, "That fat constable is quite good at talking." The next morning, when Li Mu came to the county yamen, he learned from Li Si that Zhongshan had been punished by Li Qing for 3 days because he didn't put on his hat properly when he entered the yamen in the morning. During these 3 days, he had to patrol the area under the jurisdiction of the 3 of them from morning to night. It also made Li Mu realize that with his strength, he was still unable to activate this mantra. If he forcefully used it, he would suffer an intense backlash. The stronger the soul body in his body, the greater the backlash. Li Mu's soul body was weak and the backlash was not great. The primordial spirit of the Venerable Master Thousand Illusions was much stronger than his and completely collapsed under this power. Li Mu's body was sent flying dozens of feet and he fainted. Before he lost consciousness, he vaguely saw a white figure flash before his eyes. "No, no." The little fox shook its head and said, "Grandma said that the Heavenly Fox clan must repay kindness. Otherwise, it will affect my future cultivation." Li Mu looked at it in shock. "You're from the Heavenly Fox clan?" According to the records of demons in the 10 continents, the Heavenly Fox clan was obsessed with karma in the human world. They would repay kindness and seek revenge for hatred. If they had a grudge with someone, they would even hide in the shadows for decades to find an opportunity to take revenge. If they were indebted to someone, they would definitely find a way to repay the favor. This was their unique cultivation method. Li Mu indeed did not need its help. However, if he met the Heavenly Fox clan, he would not change their mind if he refused to repay their kindness. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Do you have any aged precious herbs? You can give me some as a token of gratitude." The little fox shook its head and said, "No." It seemed that the little fox was even poorer than a yellow rat, could not even get a single herb. Li Mu said, "Then just give me something. We'll be even in the future." The little fox still shook its head and said, "My benefactor saved my life. How can I just give you something? That would not be enough to repay your kindness." Li Mu had no other choice. He said helplessly, "Then tell me, how do you want to repay my kindness?" The little fox suddenly lowered its head. A hint of shyness appeared in its gem-like eyes. It said in a low voice, The book says that I have to repay my benefactor with my body." Li Mu was stunned. There was once a beautiful snake who wanted to marry him, but Li Mu did not agree. Now, there was a fox who had not even transformed. She had to repay him with her body if he saved her life. He had also saved Lu Hanyan. Why didn't she have the same awareness, and moreover, why were there only snakes and foxes who wanted to marry him? Was he not worthy of living with humans? Li Mu was indignant. He squatted down and looked at the little fox seriously. "You're still inexperienced. You don't understand the evil in people's hearts. Don't be fooled by those unscrupulous authors." The little fox shook its head and said, He's not an unscrupulous author." Li Mu snorted and said, "What kind of book are you reading? I'd like to know who dares to spout such nonsense." The little fox said, "Strange stories from a Chinese studio." He narrowed his eyes and watched as the executioner chopped down on Zhao Yong's head with a knife in his hand. In the north of the city, in a dilapidated house, the soul of the Zhongwang clan had just dissipated and was condensed in another place. The last memory was in a remote dark alley. A figure in official uniform that Li Mu could not be more familiar with walked in and never came out again. After these fragments of memories flashed back, they gradually dissipated. In a short moment, Li Mu experienced his journey in the past few months from Old Wang's point of view. The venerable Master Thousand Illusions had always been cautious. In addition to the flying stiff in Zhou County, he had also secretly kept a backup plan. Even if that plan failed, he would only lose the soul that possessed the flying stiff. If he could gather the souls of the yin and yang and the five elements once, he could gather them again. At that time, who would doubt him? Imagination was beautiful, but reality was cruel. Unfortunately, he met Li Mu, a Dongxian heretical cultivation expert. In the end, he still ended up dead. Li Mu gathered his thoughts and leaned against a tree, waiting for the little fox to return. The crisis had been resolved. He looked up and saw that the originally gloomy weather had unknowingly turned into a clear sky. A white figure ran over from afar. When it saw Li Mu still standing there, it said happily, "Benefactor, Grandma agreed. Let's go." Although he had agreed to let the little fox follow him temporarily, there were some things that Li Mu had to pay attention to on the way back. As he walked, he said, "First, without my permission, you can only stay at home obediently. You can't go out as you wish." This was mainly for the sake of the little fox. Although there weren't any powerful cultivators in Yangshuo County, it was best for a fox that had just formed a fetus not to wander around the streets. If a cultivator with bad intentions saw it, it was inevitable that they would have evil thoughts. The little fox nodded seriously and said, "I will stay at home obediently." Li Mu added, "Second, you can't talk in front of outsiders." The little fox hurriedly said, "I know. I won't speak carelessly." Although the little fox was stubborn, it was very obedient. The fox behind him was eye-catching. After entering the county, Li Mu held it in his arms. The little fox hid in Li Mu's arms and looked around. His gem-like eyes shone with curiosity. Li Mu walked to the door. A constable standing there saw him and immediately came up to him. "Li Mu, where did you go? I looked everywhere for you." Li Mu asked. "What's the matter?" The constable looked at Li Mu and said hesitantly, "There's something that I don't know how to tell you. Anyway, hurry to the yamen." After sending the little fox home, Li Mu left the house and headed for the yamen. He had just stepped into the yamen when Zhang Shan came over and said sorrowfully, "Li Mu, you're finally back." Old Wang, he's gone. In Old Wang's room, his corpse was placed on a small bed. His hands were folded over his abdomen and his expression was very peaceful. In truth, this was only one of Venerable Master Thousand Illusions' plans. The real Old Wang had died a few months ago. If Venerable Master Thousand Illusions' plan had succeeded, the one standing here now would not be Li Mu, but him. After Old Wang, Li Mu would be his second target for possession. As Li Mu, he would continue to live in the county yamen and perhaps collect the souls of the 5 elements. He would replace Li Mu and work under Li Qing. He would enjoy Li Qing's kindness. He would become neighbors with Lu Hanyan and let Wanwan massage his back and shoulders. Even the little fox that Li Mu saved would come to him after it transformed into human form to repay his kindness. It was unforgivable. Li Mu did not tell Zhang Shan and the others about these things. In any case, Venerable Master Thousand Illusions was dead. This result was enough. Otherwise, Li Mu would find it difficult to explain how he killed Venerable Master Thousand Illusions. This involved too many of his secrets. It was better to let them believe that Old Wang had died of old age and that Venerable Master Thousand Illusions had died under the encirclement of the experts of Fulu School. His trust in Old Wang was second only to Li Qing and Lu Hanyan. He did not expect that the person he trusted so much was the mastermind who had been spying on him from behind the scenes. It had to be said that Old Wang, or Venerable Master Thousand Illusions, had used practical actions to teach Li Mu a good lesson. Not only did he teach Li Mu a lot of cultivation knowledge, but he also taught him that on the path of cultivation, he should not easily trust anyone. He had shown Li Mu the cruelty of the cultivation world. In the future, he would have to be more careful in his cultivation. In the end, Zhang Shan did not covet Old Wang's inheritance. Instead, he took out all his private savings and put them together with Old Wang's savings. He planned to prepare a good coffin for him. Li Mu could not afford a gold-rimmed Nanmu coffin. A gold-rimmed Nanmu coffin could buy a 5-section house in Yangqiu County. He gave Zhang Shan some silver, enough to buy a good Nanmu coffin for Old Wang. Li Mu returned to the duty room. When he saw Li Qing, he was about to speak when Li Qing said indifferently, "Close the door. I have something to say to you." Li Mu turned to close the door and asked, "Boss, what's the matter?" Clang. A white light flashed in front of Li Mu's eyes. He felt a cold sensation on his neck. He lowered his head and looked at the Qinghong sword on his neck. He then looked at Li Qing with a puzzled expression. Li Qing looked straight at him and said coldly, "Who are you?"